Hi guys, Future Tristan here. Want to thank you for listening to another episode of Ordinary People, Extraordinary Stories. Just want to give a personal shout out to our Patreon supporters, more specifically, Tamsin and Courtney. We sincerely thank you for helping the channel, and if you're interested, feel free to click the link below to see our Patreon, where we have exclusive clips and episodes, as well as exclusive polls and deciding the next episode. So, with that said, let's get to the intro.
Yar, matey! Avast ye! Hoist those sails and batten down the hatches. This is your captain speaking, Tristan the Terrible, ready to regale ye with another tale of ordinary people, extraordinary stories, yar.
All right, I'm going to stop that for just a second. Well, hey everybody, thanks for stopping by for another episode of OPES, where today we'll be traveling all over the 7 seas with my good friend, Dr. Captain Brian. A little context for you, if you're new around here. About last September when I broke my ankle, I was rushed to an urgent care with a man I knew very little and no real medical insurance with me. Luckily, however, everything was taken care of, and Dr. Brian was the one to patch me up and put a boot on me. In just a few minutes, I got to know the guy. We already had each other laughing and telling stories as if we'd been friends for years. And through conversation, found out that Brian is a bit of a buccaneer. You see, Brian took up small boat sailing as a Boy Scout, and his sailing career only grew to bigger and bigger ships. Literally. Now, Brian was never an actual sailor, but the man has put in so much work that any Navyman would say he has earned his sea legs. You see, he was a crew member of the HMS Bounty. Now, to all you landlubbers, that's a real old ship with lots of history. We're talking old, big wooden ship. Think Pirates of the Caribbean. And speaking of which, Brian, with his knowledge and history of being a crew member on the ship, was even hired out by Disney to help pilot and train the cast members of the second and third Pirates of the Caribbean movies. Again, I just knew this guy because I broke my ankle and was taken to a clinic that he happened to be working at that day. So it's a small world, people, I'll tell you. Anyways, find out how he went from Seaman to Doctor Man in this very nautical themed episode of OPES. So, with that being said,
If you're ready, grab those eye patches, grab some grog, and get ready to walk the plank to meet Davy Jones down in the briny deep for another ordinary pirate with an exceptional story. Yar!
just to lay some ground rules, though, and I'll answer that question you originally asked off the episode, but no, doing great. As far as like this goes, this is just going to be, we're just having fun. Like the questions mentioned, we may go to those questions, we may not. This is just us hanging out, and I know we have about 2 hours. If you need to go before, let me know. That should be fine. And then normally I'd say if you got something to plug, but I don't think you're writing a book or doing some self-help seminar. So
one day.
I mean, is there anything you're potentially interested in, or anything I can be like, hey, be on the lookout for this?
Nothing is actively pen to paper at the moment, but there's a lot of potential thoughts in the works. Talked about working on a book. We've talked about working on seminars. We've talked about textbooks. We've talked about all kinds of stuff as far as options and just stuff to sort of take between my wife and I and our experience sailing and our experiences throughout healthcare and things like that, and try to merge those and tie those into experiential education and those kind of things.
Right on. And I mean, if you want, we can always touch on some subject later in the episode too. There's a whole world out there as far as like people wanting to share their story.
Yeah.
Not necessarily just make money off of it, but I mean, it's there's opportunities to do so.
Oh, well, that'd be cool.
But yeah, no, as far as how I've been doing, like seriously, like this break has been supernatural. Been healing incredibly well. I'm for the most part walking on it. We have stairs in the house, or at least the townhome, so sometimes I can get a pain in the butt. I'm slowly using every other step instead of it one step at a time.
There you go.
I mean, I can walk on it. It doesn't look nearly as purple.
That's always good.
And even I literally saw my doctor today, and my doctor was like, for the most part, everything looks matched up except one side of an X-ray. There's like you can kind of see it though, but he said, "Hey, we're only a month in the healing process, so we got some more time till then."
Awesome.
But it's crazy, and I'm so glad you came in and you wanted to do this episode because was telling myself like, this is the reason why I broke my ankle was our interaction. Because if I didn't get you on here, I feel like I broke my ankle for nothing, man. Come on. But
no worries, man. Yeah, it was really cool chatting with you that night, and again, like your experience now. This is completely based off of memory, and it was archery tag at church camp.
Basically, men's retreat. So like a grown man church camp.
That's awesome.
And that's exactly what happened. So I guess for everyone who doesn't know, also everyone, welcome to OPES, another episode of Ordinary People, Extraordinary Stories. My name is Tristan, your lovable host, and yeah, I actually have my, could I say doctor, or were you just the guy who just patched me up and sent me on my way?
So I got my doctorate as a family nurse practitioner. So I am a family doctor.
Okay, well, so then I'll tell you the story. But essentially, I broke my ankle, and he was the doc at the urgent care who helped me out. And excellent bedside manner. And how I broke it, to the people who don't know the story, is I went to a men's retreat. I've been starting going to this church very recently, and they mentioned a men's retreat. For everyone who doesn't do church, basically a bunch of grown men go out in the woods, usually to some camp setting, and talk about Jesus and occasionally hurt themselves. And I did the latter. As you mentioned, you were right. It was archery tag. So it was, imagine a basketball court. There's 4-on-4 of people against each other. They weren't like, real sharp arrows. It was like more like suction cups or rubber bits at the end. But I mean, I heard archery tag and I'm like, that sounds cool. I need to be about it.
And I was like, yeah, that sounds exactly like something that I would find just fascinating.
Oh, and I bet you'd even love doing it too. It's like,
oh, absolutely.
Just shooting because that's what I was telling people. It's like, I'm not being sexist. Women can understand it too. But just like the feeling of shooting another grown man with an arrow, you feel like, yeah, like, yeah,
takes you back to a more primitive state of being in that history of humanity.
Oh, absolutely. Just very unga bunga brain. Just like, that's warrior strong. Exactly. So what happened is we played 3 games too many, or I did, I should say. And like, oh my God, after the first game, I was just at it. I couldn't do it. I was like, I don't smoke, or at least not much, but the whole thing was I was like dying. I was like,
hey, somebody bring me a Diet Coke.
Just the first one, and I played 2 more games after that. But the third game, my whole squad gets wiped out. It's like 4-on-4, so everyone dies. And what you have to do is you have to grab the arrows in the middle of the court first, then run back to where you started so you can start shooting people. Everyone's dead. I grab a handful of arrows, I slide into cover, and literally my mind says like, okay, Tristan, now's the time. Like you're going to bring everyone back. You're going to win this game. You're going to get the W. Like let's do this. And my ankle's like that. No. And I rolled it to my left ankle to the right, put my full force on the left ball of my ankle and heard an audible pop. Yeah. The moment it happened, I'm like, ow, and this is not good. And I hit the ground just immediately. I was like, nope, no more. All done.
Wow.
And did I tell you they were still shooting arrows at me too when it happened? I was like, bro, come on. Like, I was like, time out, please, time out.
Call an audible.
But but no, but
I've worked in a lot of different camps throughout my life, and it's not uncommon to have grown men hurt themselves in the woods. So, it's all good.
it's I don't even think it's just grown men. I remember even at church camp, like it just there's just something about being people outdoors, and they're just
Mhm.
don't. Maybe they're like I'm stronger than that, or they find out, and I found out. But to everyone else, to kind of knowing why, so he was my doctor at the urgent care, but it wasn't just the fact that his excellent bedside manner wanted me to have him on here. I was just trying to tell him about the podcast when he told me about his life story, and that he was and if I'm not mistaken, you'll correct me, a ship captain, or you essentially rode or drove, or you used a old timey, almost like Pirates of the Caribbean giant friggin' boat, and that was a career for you, and now
Mhm.
you're a doctor. And
Yeah.
just that, like I've told like a good at like 20 plus, I've told at least 10 people today what I was doing, who my guest was, and the moment I told them like old timey ship, like what? And he's not from
Yep.
the Navy. I'm like, nope, just
Nope.
and
Yeah,
then they're
that's
like,
always the question.
yeah,
And that's
because
always the reaction too, is it's like, wait, what do you do? I'm like, well, I do this thing. It's
so. And I mean, yeah, dude, that's why I had to have you on here. So again, thanks for coming. Appreciate that.
my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
This may or may not get edited out, but I always do a thing where I tell people I'm going to edit, or I tell the person I'm going to edit something and then say something wildly personal. If you need to go to the bathroom, timeout, anything like that, let me know. We can almost edit everything out, even though it's recording. So,
No worries.
and then, yeah, like I said, we'll just kind of jump in. You're doing great so far. And then I think the ending. Oh, yeah. This. Sorry. Usually, like I'm always like interviewing people who are like, "Yeah, I have a 12 steps of success for
Hmm.
uh skincare." Just some dumb like no, well, not the people who have been on. They're great, but just everyone's always got something to push though. So it's
I
fun. We're
got you.
just having a little discussion today.
No worries. Hanging out.
A regular, ordinary story, if you will.
Yeah.
Well, I guess let's get into it, or we'll figure. How did you start into that, or maybe maybe start before that, like kind of give us a little brief person before you were a sailor, if you will.
Yeah. So officially, my life before I got into healthcare, I was a professional sailor. I specialized in traditional rigged sailing vessels. Some people call them tall ships, some people call them pirate ships. So they got all kinds of names, but essentially it's traditional rigged sailing vessel. It's the style of sailing vessel that was, and forgive my dog in the background, she's excited. Traditional rigged sailing vessels are the thing that was the culmination of human technology about 120 years ago. So before the Industrial Revolution, you had these massive, some of them were large, some of them were small, but you had these sailing vessels that were capable of achieving immense things. People took them around the world. People ran grain trade. It was the thing of moving everything around the world.
People, tea, sugar, just you're right. Just it's the
Everything. It was how the world got around. It was just the culmination of, and the most technologically advanced thing on the planet was happening for the benefit of sailing vessels. Everything was pushing for better navigation, better communication, better, bigger, better, faster, more, carry more, do more, those kind of things. So then you had the industrial revolution, and then you had the onset of diesel engines, and then you had all of that, and brought us to where we are today, where I meet and I always get such a kick out of this. Like, I meet people on either Navy ships or these large motor yachts kind of thing. And there was years ago, I was in a shipyard, and this motor yacht came in, and they were nice, and was chatting with them, and they invited me to food on board. And it was, of course, instead of eating my, can of tuna fish out of with a little sport kind of a thing, I
right.
was like, yeah, I'll go eat your food. That's cool. If you guys want to host me, I'm more than happy to do that. They were all complaining about, oh, it was such a long voyage. We just made it back from Gibraltar. It took us 2 weeks. So Gibraltar is like the southern coast of Spain, this little tiny tip that's owned by the British, and it's the entrance of the Mediterranean. And I chuckled because that trip took me 67 days on a sailboat.
Mm,
And I was like, oh, 2 weeks. Wow,
that's cute.
that's harsh.
Yeah. Try 2 months,
How
baby.
did you make it? And it's all perspective, because when you're in that situation and you're staring at the big blue ocean and you're just like, okay, all it is just distance and time and blue and, just waves in the boat and whatever crew you got on board. But
You really painted a picture because, like, I mean, that's the, I didn't even think. Because, like, obviously I knew it was like, yeah, it takes a while to get from point A to point B, but you're right. It's like you're dealing with a whole new level of just not necessarily isolation, but you're just there. You're just literally out on the waters, and you kind of have to take care of your mental health. But how do you do that when you're in the middle of the freaking ocean?
yeah, you have to. I mean, part of it is that you're just there and you're stuck there. So whatever happens, you're just stuck with dealing with.
Yeah.
The other part of it is there is a level of acceptance going into those kind of voyages of like, okay, I've planned as much as I can plan. I am confident that I have enough food. I'm confident that I have, enough gear on board to solve the problems of things that are going to break to make sure that I'm going to get to that next spot. So if, sails blow out, or if rigging breaks, or if, something goes wrong, you have the equipment on board to be able to repair it, or you figure it out and you get yourself home. Like, it's that level of self-reliance, which is kind of cool. And that's one of the things that has always kind of appealed to me about it, was just, when you're out there and you're in the middle of it and you're just doing it, the only thing to do is just keep doing it until you get to the end of the voyage. And
That's right.
whatever the ocean throws at you and whatever nature throws at you and whatever gets thrown at you, you just kind of deal with it and you keep plugging on. And if the plan is that, in a week we're going to be here, if you can't focus on that much time, okay, well, let's focus on getting through the day. And if that's too much, then okay, let's focus on getting through the watch. And if that's too much, okay, let's focus on getting through just this moment right here, because this moment is really sketchy. Those kind of things. And it's just trying to break things down to their most consumable. I don't know if that's the word I'm looking for. The most
No, I like that.
yeah.
Or we can say digestible.
Yeah, that word.
Like, again, it's like, how do you make it just where you can just, okay, I can handle this insanely stressful moment. We're all dying, but like, I know how to get to that next moment, like you're referencing.
Yeah, it's you just gotta kind of focus on the task at hand and get you to the next one.
Well, okay. So, and man, and I got to be careful because like, there's so many stuff you're saying. I'm just like, what about this?
It's
I
all
forgot I'm
good.
doing a show. And
Fire
let's
away.
chronologically
Dive in.
let's start from the beginning. So,
Okay.
how did you get to this job? And I kind of know the answer. So go before that. Like,
Okay.
where do we start?
So the longest part of that, or like if we dive all the way back to the very beginning, my very first sailing experience, so I grew up in a town in Michigan, and there wasn't a whole lot to do. So I got into Boy Scouts.
Okay,
And Boy
you're a
Scouts
Boy Scout.
Yeah,
Did you make it all the way to Eagle? Or
I did.
good for you. Good. I don't. I think I barely made it, but keep going. Keep going.
One of my so I was at this camp, and it was I had this opportunity to take the small boat sailing merit badge, and I was like, yeah, this is going to be cool. This is going to be fun. I'm this young teenage person, and I'm, really just excited about being in nature and trees and just loving this life of adventure that is out in front of me, and all these possibilities, these endless possibilities. So I take this small boat sailing merit badge, and you have to get so much time sailing on the lake and the whole thing. And
Right.
so I was behind on the amount of time that I needed to finish the merit badge. So it's the last day of camp. Everybody's getting ready to pack up. I had talked to the people at the waterfront, and they said, okay, we'll let you have the boat, but I didn't have anybody to go with me. And they said, well, just stay where we can see you. We'll sit here and we'll watch, and it's fine. No worries. Got my life jacket on. I'm in this it was a Hobie catamaran. It's got little plastic pontoons. It got this little aluminum setup and a little mast in the whole thing.
Sure.
I'd sailed a couple other smaller boats at that point, but this was so they didn't tell me that they accidentally gave me the wrong boat, that this one was kind of broken.
Oh, okay.
And I found that out when I went to tack the boat, and I'm out kind of in the middle of the lake, and when the boat turned, one of the cross braces that connects the two pontoons.
Okay. I may have to interrupt you. I'm like, you keep saying pontoon, and I'm trying. I'm like, I know what that. I don't know. Can you actually maybe dumb it down for a non-nautical person?
So imagine that you have two plastic tubes on the sides of which makes the hull of the boat. There's two small plastic tubes.
Okay.
And there's little aluminum piece that holds them together, and you sit in between. They're about 3 feet apart, maybe 4 feet apart.
All right.
So those pieces are the flotation, as opposed to like a rowboat where you have one big hull kind of a thing.
Okay.
This has two different sections on the side.
What's this boat called?
It's called a catamaran. Hobie Cat is the specific name.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so it's like almost like, for everyone who doesn't imagine, it's like, imagine a full-size, queen-size bed with two little kayaks on each side of them. Yeah, okay, and a big old sail. Beautiful. All right.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Because I was gonna ask, how big was this, and you had to pilot this thing by yourself?
Yeah.
That's okay.
It's like 12, maybe.
I was just 12, just having a little mini child pirate ship. I love it.
I was having a good time. It was a good time. So then the thing broke and the mast fell into the water, and one of the hulls tore a hole in it, and it started to sink.
Oh my God. Okay.
And I'm like in the water, and I'm floating, and I got my life jacket on, and I've swum around the lake a bunch of times. And I think that was the year that I did my mile swim, or maybe it was the year after that. So I'm a good swimmer. I'm not like in a situation where
it's dangerous or scary.
It's not really dangerous, but in my mind, I'm like, oh crap, I broke their boat. They're going to be so unhappy.
Not like I could die.
That's where my brain went. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm in the lake, and the boat's sinking, and I'm like, well, I can't get rid of the boat. And my mind goes into all these like, well, what do you do when your boat sinks? Well, they didn't really cover this in the merit badge.
This wasn't in the manual.
This wasn't in the booklet. So I'm like, okay, well, I have to get somebody's attention because I need some help. I can't swim the boat back. It's too heavy. It's going to sink to the bottom of the lake, and I don't want it to do that. So I was like, I want to call to them, but I don't want to scream help, because that's not the situation we're in. Everything is fine. I'm just, floating out here.
We're not there yet, kind of thing.
Not quite there yet.
Yeah.
So I started to scream, excuse me, can you guys come help me?
Excuse me.
But they couldn't hear me, so I'm like waving my arms, and I'm like, hello, kind of a thing. And they finally see me, and they plop me out of the water. And I was like, so I didn't actually finish the class. And they're like, no, you did fine. You're good. We'll sign your merit badge, and there you go. So that was kind of
all right.
So I passed by sinking the boat, which is kind of ironic. But
right. I feel like that's like, oh, you know why? I don't know if they'd hire you to be like, I know how to sink ships. You need a guy.
You know what? So that was kind of my first taste at sailing. A couple more scouting adventures where I did some other sailboat kind of things, and just always have been a big fan of the water and big fan of boats, and just being on the water and snorkeling in my local lake with little sunfish.
So you were always just a frog. You were always just a water person. Yeah. I don't know why I thought you would moved from a landlocked country, but do you think it's because of how big the Michigan lakes are? That's what really kind of made you fall in love with it? That's
definitely a part of it. Like, Michigan was a cool spot to grow up, and that whole kind of adventure part of, reading those books of Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn, and reading Robinson Crusoe as a kid, and, reading all those books as a kid, doing, having that thought of, wow, this is, I could do that. I want
to boat and go on an adventure. That's...
Yeah. So, fast forward to my high school years, again, through Boy Scouts, I needed to find some kind of summer job, and one of my buddies was like, hey, I'm going to go work at a Boy Scout camp. Do you want to come with? So I was just like, yeah, let's do that. So I told my parents, I'm like, I'm going to go work at a Boy Scout camp. And they're like, okay, have fun. And so he and I, with a couple other friends of ours, we worked the waterfront. So I was teaching the sailboat, and I was teaching motorboating and lifeguarding and all that classes and just all the aquatics kind of stuff, and really enjoying that. And the next year they invited me to come back, and they offered to send me to camp school for the camp health officer. So I got some national certification training, and Boy Scouts just kind of kept sort of pushing me or giving me these opportunities to do these things and to kind of have these experiences that would give me opportunities to, have jobs and work and travel to, go live at camp with, bunch of teenagers in the woods by yourself, unsupervised, and we're in charge of people and stuff, which on paper seemed like a good idea. The shenanigans that took place behind the scenes were quite hilarious.
I can only imagine there's probably an 80s movie about that somewhere where, you're...
I'm sure there's a bunch of them, but most of the 80s movies kind of took place around that.
Yeah.
The camp health officer took me to national camp school. I got those certifications.
Awesome.
That was when I sort of had this inkling in the back of my mind that I was always going to go into healthcare of some kind, nursing school, something.
Okay, even with all that water experience, like the nothing with the water kind of crept in. It was mainly I want to do healthcare.
So healthcare was just something that I had thought about. And this is like the high school years and the teenage years,
right.
But I didn't really have any kind of direction. I was just kind of bouncing around.
You're probably just thinking about the Saturday. I'm just trying to get to the weekend, and just get to, yeah, you're not worried about what future, what healthcare do I want? You're not worried about that.
Always just trying to enjoy life and just kind of have a good time.
Amen. Okay.
The camp director that I worked for at Lost Lake Scout Reservation, Stan, was phenomenal guy, just phenomenal human being.
Shout out to Stan.
Yeah, shout out Stan, the Buffalo Man himself. And anybody who gets that reference, I'm really impressed by you. But so he was like, you should really think about this opportunity. I got a friend of mine who works down or Florida Sea Base. You should really check this out, and you should go for it.
Okay.
So I'd heard of Florida Sea Base. Florida Sea Base is a Boy Scout camp down in the Florida Keys. It's called a high adventure base. So in Boy Scouts, you have these couple of places around the country that are high adventure. So high adventure is high risk, high reward, more, physically demanding, more physically challenging. It's much more adventurous of a gig. Like a typical Boy Scout outing is you go out for a camp out on the weekend. You can take it as heavy as you want. You can do as much or as little as you want as far as the adventure aspect. High adventure, there's the two big ones are Sea Base and Philmont, and there's a couple other smaller ones in around the US, but Philmont is all about backpacking, and you just load up your backpacks and you hike around New Mexico. And you can do anywhere from, I don't know, I've never actually been there, but I could never, that was my thing, is I could never afford to go to these camps because they're all kind of pricey. So right. I would work at them, and then they pay me to be there. And I
like you're paying what stuff I'd give you money for. This is great. Thank you.
Yeah, right. So I send my application into Sea Base. I was looking at their website, and they have this job called the Sea Exploring Mate. And it's listed as the flagship of the Sea Base is a 105-foot schooner, and the Sea Exploring Mate takes all the crew of that boat, and they take them onto the boat, and then they sail around the Florida Keys for a week at a time. And you're kind of the liaison between the ground base and the boat. And I said, that sounds like the coolest thing. They also do a bunch of scuba diving, and they do a bunch of other small boat sailing and all kinds, or well, what they call small boat sailing, but they're 41-foot sailboats, cruiser boat kind of things.
Right.
Most of the boats, actually all of them, are all privately owned by other people who then contract themselves to Sea Base.
Interesting.
For the season. So I end up getting a phone call in the middle of the afternoon one day. I'm living up in Michigan. I don't know what I was doing at the time. And they're like, hi, I'm from Sea Base. It was Owen, actually. I was like, oh, hi. He's like, hey, I got your resume and I got your, and all your contact information and looked over and we'd love to hire you. We want you to come down as a sea exploring mate. And I was like, okay,
Hey.
cool. I'm going to work on a schooner. I had no idea what a schooner was. I didn't know.
I had to look it up. I was like,
Yeah.
okay. But
So I went to my parents and I said, hey, I'm moving to the Florida Keys. And again, they were like, okay. This time they were a little bit more like, well, what do you mean you're moving to the Florida Keys? And I told them about sea base and
we're a Michigan
like,
family,
okay,
dang it.
more Boy Scout stuff. We get it. It's not just you bombing off doing God knows what else.
Right.
So I pack up my little car and I drive down to Florida Keys and get into Isla Morada and meet the crew of the boat that I'm going to be working on and the owner of the boat. And then I just kind of jumped into it. And every trip, every 7 days, I would learn a bunch more new things about sailing a schooner. And then the following week, I would teach all of those things that I just learned. It was everything from sailing maneuvers to navigation to we would stop at coral reefs. So it was reef exploration. It was snorkeling. And then I learned, I was always just excited to learn more things. So I was free diving and fish identification. And it just.
And they paid you to do that.
I mean, you can call it that.
Oh, was it like indentured slavehood kind of thing?
There was a financial transaction, but it was not very much. It was more than I needed. And every contract that I ever ended, I always left with more money in my pocket than I started. So,
okay. Well, there you go. But still, it just sounds so exciting because it's like
it was
having like various moments or like kind of, you would definitely some like key memories for kids that went there or like Boy Scouts are like, oh my God, like that experience I had with, probably doesn't remember your name, but he's like, Captain Brian. Oh man, it was excellent.
That was always a lot of fun. And having that experience to be able to, live and work on the boat, to sail, to snorkel, we'd anchor out, we did all kinds of stuff. And that was the biggest catalyst for me to be able to, step into sailing. And at the end of that contract, they actually offered me work to continue sailing and to run more and just kind of keep going. And that was kind of the end of it. But interestingly enough, that was also there's the ocean has a very interesting learning curve to it because that time was one of a very humbling experiences where some crew members that were all adults, we decided that we were going to go out to one of the boats at nighttime and just kind of be on the boat for an overnight, kind of hang out, chill out, relax. And there was a storm that had kind of rolled through, so it was a little choppy. And the dinghy so the dinghy is the small boat that you use to get to and from shore. The big boat's anchored out there because it's a 105-foot boat.
Right.
So it's 100 feet long. So it's fairly large.
It's a little rowboat to get you to thing, and then to get the stuff to go back on the boat. I got you.
So the small boat that we took to get to the big boat sank. It went down. We were taking on a little bit of water and we're like, oh, I think we'll make it. And then all of a sudden it was just boom, it was underwater.
Jeez.
And so the boat is gone. We've got life jackets. As many of us can swim to the big boat. We can see it. So it's a couple 100 yards away. So we're swimming but we've got the ocean currents and only half of us were able to swim to the big boat.
Jeez.
Fired up the radio. I actually was the one who called the Coast Guard. Mayday, mayday, mayday. I've got, a vessel that sank. I've got swimmers in the water and Coast Guard comes back. And then I've got helicopters and I've got a boat and they picked everybody up. Everybody survived. Everybody was fine. We all got stung up by jellyfish pretty hard. But
praise God. that's, I mean, thank goodness. Cause like I was waiting for, and then the sharks came or just,
the worst. I mean, there's a lot of things about that night and the decision-making processes that went through that evening that were lacking greatly. I remember the other crew member and we kind of looked at each other and we're like, let's try it. Let's see what happens. And it was, you could tell that everybody was like, we shouldn't be doing this. We know better. We shouldn't be doing this. But none of us actually took the step to own up and say, we're not going to do this. So the interesting thing about where the boat was anchored that night was, and again, this is none of the passengers, we didn't endanger anybody. This is all, just friends of ours who worked in the maritime industry.
Right.
So we all had experience on boats. We all knew better, but it was just one of those kind of situations where we're like,
we're kids, we're young, we're invincible.
it'll
Let's,
be fine. So, again, the ocean laughs when you say it's going to be fine. So where the boat was anchored happens to be just at the northern end of 7 Mile Bridge. And for anybody who's familiar with the Florida Keys and 7 Mile Bridge, that's one of the major hotspots for some of the largest hammerhead sharks that chill out in and around the Florida Keys.
Okay.
So it's not uncommon to see 14-foot hammerheads, then there's stories that there's some that are significantly bigger. There's a lot of big bull sharks that hang out in there. Seen a bunch of really big, scary fish with lots of big teeth in and around that area. It's like 10:30 at night. We're in just god awful swells, and man-of-war jellyfish are stinging us all over our bodies. And
gotta ask, is it true? Like, that's how you cure jellyfish sting? Pee on it?
So interestingly enough, it's the heat. Oh, so this jumps into,
and you're like, where do I go from here?
No, it's all good. It's all good. I've heard that so many different times. And I've always heard that there was a study that I read that was done in Oahu, and it was done actually at the ER on Oahu of man-of-war stings. People and tourists that would come in with man-of-war stings. The ER in Oahu did a study where they were looking at, I've heard meat tenderizer, I've heard urine, I've heard all kinds of different things. However, it's the heat aspect. Heat neutralizes marine venom stings. So like when I was living in the Bahamas, I got stung in my hand by a lionfish. I was spearfishing and it flopped down the spear on me and got my hand. And it burns like,
oh, those things. Yeah. I bet they don't tickle.
Yeah. Lionfish are the ones that you see in the dentist office fish tank a lot because they look really cool.
Basically, like striped. They look like freaking porcupines, like aquatic porcupines. It's
a big aquatic, scary looking porcupine. In the Bahamas, they're actually an invasive species. So you're encouraged to kill and eat them because, for one, they're delicious.
Two, they're not supposed to be here.
Yeah. The challenge is they eat like a third of their body weight every night.
Oh my God.
Just like me.
So they're just decimating the reefs. So anytime that there's a lot of lionfish, nothing hunts them aside from people. So the Bahamas would always host a lionfish derby where you just go out and kill as many of them as you can. And just to try to save the natural reef, because if nothing kills them, they just eat everything.
Exactly. We have to. They are delicious. That's not the point. The point is we're saving nature. We're appropriating the balance.
But it's a perk that they're delicious. So
if anything, because you point out, though, I mean, they wouldn't technically have a predator because of their sharp quills. Like nobody would be able to really take a chunky chomp on them.
So not in the Atlantic. Their native home is like South Pacific, Southeast Asia, things like that. And I believe that there's things there that eat them, I'm told, but I have no idea what they are.
Well, okay. So we start at sea base.
Yeah.
Because I thought that's where we ended, was just like that's the whole entire boat gig was sea base.
That was the very beginning. That was the thing that I realized that I could sail boats and get paid to do it. So bounced around, worked a couple of different boats, made a couple of different nice long runs, had just some really cool experiences, just being the quote unquote, what was often referred to in the industry as the schooner bum. The schooner bum was a loving kind of reference to these crew members and sailors that would just kind of jump from schooner to schooner.
Okay.
You live out of a backpack. I had a car, which was nice. So if I happened to have the opportunity to leave and return from the same state, then I'd always get a ride back to wherever I ditched my car. but every now and again I'd end up on, the other side of the country. And then it was a matter of, I remember the worst one was a Greyhound bus from Florida to wherever, I think New York. And that was the thing that I could afford.
just just living in a bus, just like can't imagine.
I remember I got really nauseous and I had to come to terms. So I've never gotten seasick in my life.
Okay.
Come close
Hey,
a couple of times.
Good on you.
I've come close a couple of times, but I've never actually vomited off the side. I've always kind of wanted to, because I think it's just one of those sort of, things that needs to happen in order to complete one's aquatic journeys, I suppose.
Right.
But so I'm in the back of this Greyhound bus, and if anybody's ever ridden in one of those, there's this porta potty tucked in the back corner that hasn't been cleaned in entirely too long. And I had the divine privilege of throwing up inside of that thing.
Oh, the awful smell. Just
It was less than amazing. And then I got to my destination. I was like, well, that's the end of that trip. I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to do whatever I can to not have to Greyhound it again.
I'm going to ride on a boat next time. That's what I'm going to do.
Boats are way easier. Yeah. They're much cleaner. I trust them.
Well, and that's just crazy because it's like because you think about how many people like backpack or live in their car, and you just have people who are just like, yeah, dude, I'll hop on boat. Like you're a boat tramp. You're just like this.
Pretty much. And there's this beautiful industry of it where you can really like do well. You can make a living. You can make some money. But everything is a contract. So you sign a contract, you jump on the boat, you live on the boat, you work on the boat, you eat, sleep, breathe, everything happens. Your life is on the boat. And then when the contract is over, you're kind of done. And then you have to find the next contract.
Okay.
So it's hence the loving term schooner bum. So after I jumped a couple of boats and been a couple of places and kind of built a little bit of experience, and I happened to be traveling in northern Michigan. I went up and backpacked the Isle Royal. It's one of the national parks up in Lake Superior. And wanted to backpack Isle Royal for a long time, and I had this opportunity, and it was one of those things where I was in Michigan, I had my car, I didn't really have anything else going on, so I was like, I'm going to go backpack Isle Royal. So I get up there, take the ferry from the mainland, head out to the island, backpack. I hear the wolves, I've had the experiences, saw the moose. It's a really cool spot. Come back, I'm in Marquette, Michigan, and I had some friends that were there, and one of the coffee shops, Dead River Coffee, shout out there.
Shout out.
That's still going. I don't know if it's the thing.
Okay.
Great guys, really cool people, playing cribbage, drinking coffee, getting completely just jacked out of your mind on caffeine, which was a great time. And they're like, oh, you've sailed boats. There's a boat that's coming into town tomorrow. And I was like, oh, that's cool. What is it? And they said, it's the HMS Bounty. And I was like, oh, I've heard of the HMS Bounty. HMS Bounty has a bit of a reputation in the industry, but she was one of the biggest and one of the most grand ships that was in the sailing industry at the time. So I was like, well, heck yeah, I'm going to stick around and watch them sail onto the dock with no engines.
Okay.
They tied up, and I introduced myself to a couple of the crew members and was like, hey, I have some sailing experience, and I was wondering if you guys were looking for crew. They said, yeah, come back tomorrow. You can talk to the mate. He'll meet with you in the morning. I was like, okay, cool. So crash another night, go back the next morning. I bring some coffee because who doesn't love coffee?
Should buy donuts too. No donuts, just coffee?
Just coffee.
Okay.
Kind of broke. Donuts are expensive. I can afford coffee. I meet with the first mate. His name is Andy. Super nice guy. Great guy. He's like, well, come on board. We'll chat. So he takes me down below decks into what's called the bosun's locker, which is where you keep all of the equipment to repair the ship. Okay. So if you need carpentry stuff, if you need metalworking stuff, if you need, pretty much anything, you can fix anything on board the boat from what's kept in the bosun's locker. So we're sitting down there and we're just chatting, and like 4 hours go by and we're chatting and we're just chatting.
Right.
And after a while, I'm hungry and I'm like, okay, well, finally I just had to kind of say to him, I was like, well, this was kind of a job interview. So
What I forgot.
out of curiosity, what do you think? He was like, oh yeah, he's this British guy. And he's like, oh yeah, I thought I was going to hire you like right after I met you. You showed up and you were on time. So that's pretty much all I need.
You already passed it. You're on the clock right now, by the way.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, so what comes next? How do I get on board? And he's like, well, did you bring your stuff with you? And I was like, you mean like right now? He's like, no, well, yeah, sure. Some of our crew just kind of show up and jump on board. I was like, I have a little bit of stuff that I need to get, organized in my world before I can hop on. But yeah, where's your next port? Chicago. Okay, I'll meet you in Chicago.
And this is all on the Great Lakes. This boat is just
That ship was traveling the Great Lakes because it was a tall ship conference or convention in the Great Lakes that year.
okay.
So every year there's a tall ship convention somewhere in the United States, and it jumps between the Great Lakes, the East Coast, and the West Coast. And boats from everybody's invited. You can join the tall ship conference, and you can actually take your sail vessel and join the tall ship convention, and go to these different ports, and then you have parade of sails and you have battle sails, and then everybody kind of there's races between the vessels in between ports, and
Right.
You're just having fun on your boat.
This is sound like a dumb question. How do you get the boat? Because I can't imagine. Is there really like water? You can just ride the boat to the ocean, or do you
Yep.
have to like take it out of the water and like take on a big ass truck or something?
So that's a really good question. From the Great Lakes, you can get to the ocean, and there's two different ways. You can either do, well, three technically. You can do the St. Lawrence Seaway, which is, if you look at a map, you've got Lake Michigan, which is Chicago. You've got Lake Huron over the other side of the state of Michigan. Then you've got Lake Erie, Lake Ontario, Lake Superior is up in the north. From Lake Ontario, you can take the waterway all the way through Canada through the St. Lawrence Seaway, and it dumps you out into the Gulf of St. Lawrence, or the Bay of St. Lawrence. And that's then the entrance to the Atlantic Ocean. And from the Atlantic, you can, pretty much get wherever you want. So a lot of the boats come in the St. Lawrence. Some of them come up the Mississippi. You can get up the Mississippi River all the way to Chicago through the river system. So some boats do that, but most of the sailing vessels come in and out the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence, because you've got big boats, you've got big waterways. You
Right.
can't really fit into the smaller stuff. So you're stuck to the limitations of the big waterways, which, I mean, you think about it, that's like a 1,000 some odd mile voyage just from the Canadian section of the leg just to the end of the St. Lawrence to the Atlantic. So, that's good stretch of travel.
Yeah.
So yeah, these boats came from all over the place and went to Chicago and jumped on, of course I get back home and I'm like, Mom and Dad, I'm jumping on another boat. And they're like,
Why?
okay.
You have to tend the farm or whatever reason.
Yeah.
They're like, buddy, you can't. No.
They're like, they sort of have always been very understanding of like, okay, are you going to be safe? Are you going to make good decisions? Okay.
Bless
Sure.
him. Shout out to Brian's parents. Thank you for letting the man get his sea legs.
So I get on board in Chicago on the HMS Bounty, and that was then the next like 4 years of my life sailing the Bounty. Talking about the financial, I was making $46 every week after taxes. For
You were just rolling in money, man. Like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, how you Mr. Rockefeller just
my salary, quote unquote salary, was $50, but then after taxes, it was $46.17.
I'm sorry, I work for the IRS, so I apologize. I don't like be You know, little change, a little dollar 50. How old were you when you did this? When you
22, 23,
Okay, I mean, that's
23.
just crazy to me that you do all this ocean stuff. And I mean, what do you actually do on the bounty? Because I know before you were like teaching kids and you were just basically doing all ocean stuff. We were, how to ride a boat, how to snorkel, blah blah. What about on the bounty? What did you do for that?
So the bounty was a totally different experience and totally different beast. Officially, the bounty's like purpose was the bounty was a so the story of the HMS Bounty goes back to 1789, 1776, I don't know, 17 something. Oh goodness, I should know this date, but it's been a long time since I've talked about the actual like
Talk
date.
about the bounty. I mean, I also have Google on here too. I see 1784.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, yeah.
So the bounty was built in England, commissioned by the British Royal Navy to carry cargo in and around the, run cargo trade.
Mm-hmm.
So its claim to fame was, you've heard of the story Mutiny on the Bounty?
I was just looking. Okay, I mean, now I do, but sure. Okay, so.
So it's the most famous mutiny in history. So the story is Captain Bligh is the captain who is commissioned by the British Royal Navy, and his duty was, or his commission rather, was to sail the Bounty from England to the South Pacific to Tahiti, where they were going to gather breadfruit plants, load up the ship full of baby breadfruit plants, take them back to the Caribbean, plant breadfruit throughout the Caribbean for food for the slave trade, because it's a high yielding, highly nutritious, it's a massive tree, produces lots of food, so they can use it in the slave trade. But there weren't breadfruit plants in the Caribbean at the time. All of the breadfruit plants that are in the Caribbean now actually came from the slave trade, where ships went to the South Pacific, gathered them, and brought them back and planted them. So when you travel throughout the Caribbean now to these small outlying islands, you can find a lot of breadfruit plantations. It was all care of the slave trade from back in the day.
Wow.
So Bligh takes the ship there. He gathers the breadfruit, but the season was off. So in order to cultivate, they needed to wait. So they were stuck there for like a year and some change.
Right.
And in the time, all the crew decided that they were going to spend more time on shore than on the ship. And they took wives and they started families and just kind of assimilated into the Polynesian culture. So then when Bligh says, okay, well, it's time to go home, they got kind of sad and angry, and partway home, they mutinied. So a small group of crew, including their first mate, Fletcher Christian, mutinied, put Bligh adrift in the longboat with 21 or 22 of his most loyal subjects. They put him adrift in a boat, which is essentially considered a death sentence. Like, you're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. We're going to put you into a longboat, which has some oars and a small sail. It's an open boat. So it's essentially your dad's rowboat with a small sail and some oars. And
in the middle of the freaking ocean,
Pacific Ocean. So then they took the ship and they went back to Tahiti. They got some natives and their friends, and then they went on a sailing expedition to try to figure out what was going to come next, because they know now they're mutineers. If they get caught, they're all going to be hung. It's going to be this thing. It's going to be court-martialed. They're all going to be murdered. So turns out Bligh survived. He only lost one of his people. He sailed 4,600 miles in this open boat with all of his crew to the island of Eastern Timor, which was the closest island that he knew of with minimal navigation skills. I love this story. Like, Bligh was, love him or hate him, tyrant or evil or whatever, like, dude was kind of a badass in the fact that he sailed an open boat 4,600 miles through the ocean, and he only lost one person. One person they stopped to try to refill water, and it was murdered by some cannibals on some random island.
Oh, shit.
But everybody else survived, which is pretty impressive.
A little bit.
So then the original mutineers, they find an island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean called Pitcairn Island that's not where it was charted to be. And the story is that Captain Cook, when he came through and charted the Pacific Islands, he accidentally mischarted the Pitcairn Island about a couple hundred miles off from where it originally was, where it actually lived. So when they come across this island, they're like, well, this has to be Pitcairn. There's nothing else around, and you're thousands of miles from anything else. So they're like, okay, well, let's hang out here and see what happens. Long story short, they ended up creating a civilization there. Some of them decided that they wanted to leave and take the risk of being court-martialed and hung just to be able to go back to Britain because they were, tired of...
Missed it. I'm tired of being on a wet, creaky boat. I want.
Yeah. So they're living on this little island. They've now created a life on this island. They've created farms. They're cultivating. So they said, well, if somebody goes back, you're going to rat on the rest of us, tell them where we are in order to save your life. So they went out and burned the ship. So now everybody's stuck. Nobody can leave.
Great.
The people that live on Pitcairn now are all direct descendants of the original bounty.
Oh, wow. Okay.
We're talking like 300 and some odd years now.
Jeez.
So kind of a neat little piece of nautical history. So I jump on board the bounty. We're going to sail through the Great Lakes as a publicity stunt for the Erie Barge Canal. We were going to go down the Erie Barge Canal. So if you travel through from Chicago, you go up around the tip of northern Michigan or the state of Michigan down.
I have my map up here too. I'm following along because I'm mildly curious about how you do this.
Yeah. So we, instead of going out to St. Lawrence, because this was actually November at the time, and then St. Lawrence is pretty close to frozen at that point and not conducive to taking a wooden ship through ice flows because, that's dangerous.
Yeah.
So we, I don't know how the gig happened, but we're going to do the Erie Barge Canal. Okay, cool. So we downrig the entire ship, and downrig means we took every piece of mast, every piece of rigging, every piece of sail, everything. We brought it down to deck.
Okay.
We stopped in Oswego, New York, which is the entrance to the Erie Barge Canal heading south. The Erie Barge Canal is just that. It was this aqueduct system that was built to essentially not have to take things through the St. Lawrence Seaway to get to the Atlantic Ocean. Yeah. And it attaches to the Hudson River and then dumps you out at New York. So it cuts the trip down by like 1,800 miles, something like that.
Yeah.
And great. The cool part is you go through these canals and aqueducts and whatnot that take you up and over the Adirondack Mountains, which was kind of cool.
Yeah. Okay.
So we got some cranes and we hoisted out the masts, and the masts on the Bounty were, they were huge. If you took your arms and put them as wide as you could stretch, it would take about 3 to 4 crew members to go around the lower mast.
Jeez.
They were huge.
That's okay. Okay.
So we find a crane trying to lift the things out. They hadn't been plucked out since the 60s when the ship was built. So it was in there pretty good, but we finally got it. Take the ship down the barge canal. The trick was we had to, the lowest bridge from water to bridge was 21 feet. But the depth of the water is you have to keep the shallowest part of the canal is 12 feet. So our boat the Bounty draws 12 feet. We have to make sure that we're going to clear the bridge of 21 feet. So we're getting ready to head into this canal, and it's hard to measure because you're like, are we going to make it? Are we not going to make it? And then we get to the point where we're like, I don't think we're going to make it. So we fired up a chainsaw and cut off a part of the ship that was sticking up too high. And then we just hammered through. And we flooded the bilges to sink the boat down lower. And then we pumped the bilges out to raise it up to go over the shallow parts. And it was an adventure. We go through the locks. We travel through. we stop at night because the lock closes at night. So you're just kind of in these small little towns on the middle of the Erie Barge Canal. I know New Amsterdam was one of the towns that was a lot of fun. So, the crew were in this phase of our lives where we're 20 and 30 something year olds, and for the most of us, and we're just kind of living this crazy adventure. And so you tie up for the night, put the boat to bed, make sure the boat's all safe, and then you just kind of wander around town and just to do something. You don't have any money, so you can't really do anything, but you just kind of walk around and you chat with people.
Maybe make friends or something,
Yeah. So we get to the Hudson River. We start to put some of the rig back up. We get to Manhattan. We put the rest of the rig back up right before we got to Manhattan. And that whole trip, we left just after Halloween. So it was early November. And then we were in Manhattan on Thanksgiving, which was kind of cool. So we're tied up to Pier 63. And they decided that a bunch of the crew, because lived in and around New England area. There was a bunch of Bostonians and a couple of people from New York. They were like, we're going to bugger off for the holiday. We're going to go see family.
Right.
So we're going to just leave the ship tied up here for a couple of days. So I got to be in Manhattan for Thanksgiving, whatever year that was. So we hoof it down, a couple of us, and we're going to watch the Macy's Thanksgiving parade, and it's going to be a blast. And we're going to experience Manhattan for Manhattan. You see the parade, but they're all quiet. So we're like, woo! And they hushed us and they shushed us. There's different sections of the parade that go through parts of the town it's a quiet zone. So we're like, it's a parade, but it's totally silent. It was bizarre.
That's such a mind, and especially when you see on TV though, it's, again, you're not getting I don't know if they even film those sections though, where it's shh.
Yeah, right. Oh, quiet. It's the business section. It's the whatever it is. But yeah, it was kind of a cool experience. So then New York, we're on the Hudson River. We pull into this little shipyard. We put the ship back together. We put all the masts back in. We're putting the sails back together. You have to take into consideration the ship is 180 feet long. She's about 200 feet tall. She's got 3 masts. She carries approximately 18-ish sails. She's a big square rig ship.
Okay.
She's classified as a fully rigged ship, so she carries 18 sails-ish, plus or minus, depending on what we have at the time and what's functional. And everything is just huge and massively heavy and awesome. So put it all back together, get to Manhattan, do Thanksgiving downtown Manhattan for a couple of days, which was a blast. And from there, we head out into the Atlantic Ocean bound for Florida, and we just head south and make our way. And that was kind of the beginning of the sort of experience on the Bounty. It took us a month to make that trip, plus or minus maybe a couple of days, but it was about a month to make it from Chicago to New York through the Great Lakes and the Erie Barge Canal.
Oh my gosh. So first let me ask, so how many people were on the ship? How many were you crew-wise?
So that particular voyage, for that specific, because we knew we were going to be doing the down rig. We knew we were doing a ton of work. So the company hired, we had a total of 30 or 32, something like that, on board for that. But typically she sailed with about 18.
Okay. But I'm just imagining the 18 people trying to take this thing apart, insanely heavy. Where do you even store all the stuff too? Because at least when you take down the sails, you probably have to fold everything. And let's talk about just the time process. So do you remember, could you at least ballpark how long it would take for you to kind of disassemble all that stuff, let alone put it back together?
So taking it apart was the easy part. You just label everything, cut it loose, and you send it down to deck on what we used was called gantlins. So it's essentially just a block and tackle. We did everything. We tried to do everything as traditional as possible. And a lot of it we had to do traditionally because the ship wasn't built for having, we didn't have an electric windlass that would lift things. It was just our crew with block and tackle and what we call the capstan, which is a giant thing that you walk around in circles, and it's just a a pulley system.
Okay.
It's just mechanical advantage, block and tackle purchase. It's the most rudimentary things that with that you can lift anything. It was amazing. We didn't have a windlass to bring our anchor up at the time. The anchor was like 4,600 pounds. So we would attach a block and tackle that was an 8-to-1 purchase. So that meant that for every 1 pound that you're lifting an eighth of that. And then you just do it. And it was the same way they did 300 years ago. It was really cool to be able to experience those kind of things.
Right.
So the majority of what we were doing on the Bounty, and kind of her purpose and her mission, was to keep those traditional sailing aspects alive. Like, it's one of the only square rig ships in the United States. It's one of the only wooden square rig ships in the world that was functioning at that time. And we tried to do everything as traditional as possible when we could. So we had engines on board, we had GPS, we had communication, we had those kind of things. In one of the rebuild iterations, in my experience, on board during my handful of years that I sailed with her, we put electric windlass up front to be able to lift the anchors, because it's safer. It's, less likely to kill somebody if something goes wrong.
Okay.
Those kind of things. For instance, we were, Jamie, great Canadian dude. Love that guy.
Shout out to Jamie. There you go.
Shout out to Jamie. Jamie's an amazing dude. If you're still out there, man, sailing around, mad props, bro. So in order to lift the anchor, so the anchor got awful heavy. The chain that connects to the anchor is god awful heavy.
Okay.
You figure in nautical terms, you have one shot of chain is 90 feet. That's a unit of measurement, a shot. Okay. So you put your anchor on the bottom, you put out however many shot of chain that you need to hold yourself in place. She was a 500-ton ship, so you need to hold a lot of weight, and depending on what the wind was doing. We carried 9 shot of chain at the time. So
that's, what is that, like 8,100 feet?
Yeah, a lot of weight in the anchor, a lot of weight in the chain. We can bring up about 80 feet at a time. And what you would do is you'd take this massive block and tackle. It was an 8-to-1 purchase. It was called the anchor tackle, we called it. And it was, the more blocks, it reduces the load, so you can lift more with less, more weight with less work.
Makes sense. Okay.
So we'd spread this thing out, we'd shackle it onto the chain, and we'd anchor one end onto a part of the ship, and then we'd just start hauling, and we'd put the tail end around the windlass or the capstan, and then we just walk in circles, and it would slowly just bring this big chunk of chain in. Then we'd lock everything down, stretch it all out, do it again. So it would take us about an hour to an hour and some change to bring in one shot of chain, depending on how much we had out. So it would take us, potentially all day to bring up the anchor, depending on how much chain we had put out. Whereas you get a windlass and you just push a button, and 10 minutes later, you're ready to go.
Right. Which, again, all the pizzazz, none of the work, though. But I mean, that's just no wonder you're such an incredible sailor. We're doing it hard mode the entire time. So
it was
that's
fun. It was part of the adventure. So one day we're pulling up the anchor, and the strop that connects the end of the block to the ship, the anchor point. So we've got X amount of however many hundreds of pounds of chain on the other end. That the strop that held that together broke. So that block then flies out, and the line twangs, and everything kind of goes haywire for a minute. And the line, thank God it was the line that hit Jamie in the head, because if it was the block, it would have probably killed him. So he goes flying, he gets clonked in the noggin, he goes flying, he lands on the deck, and everybody stops. And my experience up at this point is I had done a bunch of first aid, and I was a lifeguard instructor. So I'd had the most amount of kind of physical or first aid kind of emergency responder stuff. I had done EMT class at one point.
Okay.
I was kind of the go-to guy for these sort of incidents where somebody would get injured and we'd just kind of patch them up and make sure everybody was okay. So he got clocked in the noggin and he opens his eyes and I'm looking over and I'm like, okay, what's your name? And he's like, okay. And I was like, what day is it? And he was like, Wednesday? And I was like, wait a minute. I don't know what day it is. And we kind of had this nice little laugh at it and he was okay. And he, turns out he was all right and no big deal. No significant injury, but those kind of things, like one small thing fails, you have the potential for catastrophic damage. And that just kind of comes into the idea of the decisions that we make in those circumstances have the potential to end human lives. And that was the thing that I kind of took away from it the most of, we have to make good decisions, because if we don't make good decisions, bad things can happen very, very quickly when you're in this circumstance on these types of boats out in the middle of the ocean. So that was kind of always that learning opportunity to give you that the ocean is the ocean is the ocean. It's just, it exists. It's going to do its thing.
We can either be prepared for it or we can underestimate it, and it could show us how much we can overestimate it, I guess. That's what I could say. Yeah. And no wonder you mentioned that thing by thing, because sometimes I think that's the kind of the secret that you were able to be prepared, is that on the times when you're not prepared, it's like, okay, what can I do in this one moment to get to that next moment?
Yep.
Which I can only imagine. You can saying that's one thing, but like doing it when the boat's sinking, or, this is a good kind of segue. Let's go into one of the questions. So what is one of the most scariest stories you've had while being on the ocean or on a boat?
There was a couple. There was a handful. So the night that the dinghy went down, that was definitely kind of a very surreal experience, where that was one of my first realizations of, again, decisions that I can make choose not to speak up when I feel that I should, has the potential to cause great harm. So that was a scary night, in that we're in the Atlantic Ocean. It was nightfall. It was 11 o'clock at night, whatever it was. It was an outbound current. So the next thing is the Gulf Stream, and that current can take you as far north as New York, or, there's a whole lot of nothing in the ocean. So the likelihood of somebody being found is actually fairly low. And we were all extremely fortunate that everybody survived that.
Yeah.
So I remember that night floating in the water, and it was never a panic moment. It was never anything like that. It was just get to the boat. We need to call for help. We need to call the Coast Guard. And then, there's a brief moment in the back of your mind where you think, I'm going to get in trouble for this, but you're like, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much trouble you're going to get in. All we need to do is we need to get everybody out of the water. And then you just do it. You just do what needs to be done, and you'll deal with the consequences later. Thankfully, everybody was okay. Nobody was significantly injured. We all had some jellyfish stings. So then Coast Guard picks everybody up. They drop them off on the boat, and they're like, so now what? They're like, well, we don't have a ride back to the boat. Can you guys take us back to shore? Can you guys just take us back to shore?
All right.
Yeah, sure. So they take us all back to land, and, our night of hanging out on the boat was kind of shot. So we all just kind of, thanked them very much and went home. I actually still have my Coast Guard blanket. It's the wool blanket that they wrapped me up in that night, because I was pretty darn cold, those kind of things. There was, you get into storms, you get into situations, you get in, leaving Manhattan right after the downrig. We were stuck on Pier 63, and the wind was really just pressing us up on the dock. We couldn't get ourselves off, so we had to wait for a window of weather where the wind lessened to where we could get off of the dock, because we couldn't get the boat off the dock. So we were all just kind of standing by, ready to go. As soon as we get this gap in the wind, we're just going to drop everything and we're going to run. But what that meant was we had this massive onshore storm that was blowing for days at the end of November in the North Atlantic, which is kind of a gnarly place to be that time of year anyway. So,
Like, how so? Like, is it just violent, or is it just like...
if you think about the stories that you've heard, so for one, you're on the tail end of hurricane season.
Yeah.
The North Atlantic is, you have the warm waters of the Gulf Stream that dump into the cold Arctic or the northern. So you've got icebergs and stuff like that. So when you have this warm water, cold water convergence, you have a lot of storms, you got a lot of heavy wind, and especially nearing the winter time, the storms get bigger, the waves get bigger, the wind gets bigger, everything just gets much more gnarly.
Right.
So we are pushing our way out, and we're just kind of beaten into this massive seaway, and we're trying to get out a little ways. And that was an insane exit to from New York, because we're like pounding into these big seas. We didn't spend nearly as much time sea stowing the ship as we should have, meaning that everything gets tied down. Everything needs to be lashed down, because anything that breaks loose has the potential to become a hazard. So if the boat's being thrown around like crazy, you have, if a heavy piece of equipment falls on you, you're going to get injured. If a small piece of equipment, then in this situation, we had a bunch of food because we're looking at several weeks worth of sailing to get down to Florida. So we've got apples and oranges and onions and potatoes and all this fresh fruit and veg that we just outfitted the ship with. And the cook was in the middle of cooking something. And as we're bouncing around, he's like, I need somebody to give me a hand. So I run into the cook and I give him a hand. And I'm holding this pot of whatever it was on the stove, and the ship rolls and I hold the pot. My job is to keep food from spilling all over the place, so we have something that night. And the ship rolls one way, and I'm holding on, and I've just got hot pot things, and I've got the lid clamped down, and I'm just kind of bracing myself, and it rolls the other way, and the cabinet behind me broke open, and these bags of flour, these like 50-pound bags of flour.
Oh, jeez.
They kind of pinned me up against the stove. And I was like, okay, well, I'm here now. I'm not going anywhere. So that's fine. And the ship rolls the other way, and a bunch of apples and oranges and onions go flying everywhere, and they're rolling all over the ship. Then another roll comes the other way, and the cabinet opens up. The latching system that we had built, or that was there, had failed because of the heavy items on the inside. So this like gallon jug of ketchup and this gallon jug of vinegar and something else, probably mustard or God knows what, falls onto the floor and breaks open. And it's like this soup of nasty ketchup, vinegar, God knows, all over my legs and feet. I'm like, this is a less than comfortable situation.
A little bit.
And that was when I almost got seasick the first time.
Oh my God.
Came really close. But so somebody comes down, helps me out. We get everything locked down. We get everything sea stowed. We get everything put away. And I'm like, I'm going to throw up. This is going to be great. And I run up on deck, and all hell's breaking loose up there too, because it was just as bad up topside as it was down below. So I just jumped into whatever work was happening up there, and, climbing up in the rigging, and we're stowing sails and we're lashing stuff down, and you're working up aloft up high in where all the sails and the rigging and everything like that is. And as soon as you get to work, your mind forgets that you're seasick and you're going to throw up. So you just kind of, you forget about it, and you just kind of keep going.
Kind of like that fight or flight thing. It's like, bro, I don't have time to be thinking about this, because I
don't have time to throw up all over the place. We're just going to do this thing.
Exactly. Oh man.
So that was kind of a sketchy experience, but that wasn't anything that was outrageous. Probably the biggest one that comes to mind was the North Atlantic crossing when we sailed from Halifax, Nova Scotia to England. we came out of the shipyard in Booth Bay Harbor, Maine. This is after I'd been on board for 3.5 years, something like that. This is like my last big run with the Bounty.
Okay.
It was supposed to be a 2-year circumnavigation of the world. We were supposed to spend 2 years going all the way around the world. I get on board in Maine. I had sailed the ship through the Caribbean, and we'd done a bunch of fun things down there and had some crazy experiences, and kind of bounced around other parts of the US and up and down the eastern seaboard, and up and down a couple of times back to and from Florida, and a handful of places in between. But the North Atlantic crossing was just, we were in between some two fairly decent sized storms. And having just left the shipyard, we had a bunch of debris. So we did a bunch of work on the ship to try to rebuild her and get her ready for this 2-year going around the world.
Right.
All of the sawdust and the debris and all that kind of stuff that just kind of accumulates down in the bilges was clogging up the bilge pumps. So Bounty had a challenge that, she would take on water. We would jettison the water with the bilge pumps. Well, the bilge pumps would clog because of all the debris. So we're trying to mitigate that as best we can. We get to Halifax. We do the Tall Ship Festival. The whole time we're like scrambling to put the ship together. We literally are stitching our sails all by hand with our bolt roping and putting all the final touching on our sails in order to be able to put them up. We got to the Tall Ship Festival with no sails in the rigging.
Oh my God.
So as we're doing deck tours and people are coming on board, we're just frantically hand stitching all these last minute touches on our sails in order to make them functional so we can put them up and then use them. So then at the end of the Tall Ship Festival, all the vessels do what's called a parade of sail, where they set all their sails, they sail around and tour, and everybody takes pictures, and you make yourself look as big and beautiful as you can. So it's just this grand festival parade kind of a thing. It's really cool to see one of those. If you ever get a chance to, it's just absolutely beautiful to see tall ships under parade of sail when they're coming in and out of a port.
Right. Parade of sails. But you roll this ship out, which is clearly not ready or wasn't about to be. And
we did the parade of sail under engine, which most boats are motoring anyway, because you have, close quarters and lots of vessels, and you're going to be motor sailing because it, potentially, I mean, if the weather works out, then cool. But if not, you got your engines as a backup. But so we literally are motoring the parade of sail, putting our first sail into the rigging as the parade is happening, and all the boats turned west and went back to the dock, and we finished our sail and we turned east and we headed across the Atlantic. Like, that was it. We were just like, nope, we're gone. Peace out.
Bye.
See you guys later. So we're in between these two big storms, and the bilge pumps are clogged, and we're taking on a little bit of water, which is not uncommon. But it got to a point where we couldn't jettison water. We couldn't dewater the boat. So we were trying to come up with ways of making the water go away. And we're in the middle of the Atlantic. We had an electronic failure, so we couldn't radio for help. And we had some other issues that were happening at the time. And there were a bunch of circumstances that we legitimately were in kind of a bad scenario.
Okay. Like what specifically, if you can think of some?
So we were taking on water and we couldn't dewater the boat. The water had actually gotten to the place where the lower sections of the ship were submerged a bit. So like the lower sections of the ship is where the crew lives. And several of the crew had to move out of the lower bunks because they were getting wet.
Right.
So that much water into the ship means about 4 feet of water, plus or minus.
Does it also mean like if it's at that point, that means you're either about to sink or like you're basically starting the process to sink?
Well,
Oh, sorry, let me phrase it. If you don't take care of it, it's a fairly easy way to get there.
The concern is that it's coming in and we can't make it go out. And we're at we're at this level of water. The level of water inside the ship is concerning, but not in a place where we were in peril at that time. So there was always kind of a joke amongst the bounty sailors that, well, the bounty was always perpetually sinking, just kind of slowly. And it was it was it was kind of always this sort of this joke. And we always just kind of dealt with it, and we were always able to get through it, and we were always able to figure it out and get over it and move on and persevere through it. And we ended up that particular voyage, it was you're in big heavy seas, you're in big winds. I think the waves on that voyage were, we saw them well over 40 feet numerous times. So the waves were 40 feet tall.
Which, how do you, you kind of answered it. You just deal with it. But like when you first saw waves like that, or were those the first time you ever saw waves like that? Isn't it terrifying to see like this thing crash into you? And how do you stay afloat on board? Do you tie yourself somewhere? Like, I always kind of figure, like, what do people do that are on the deck, out, in the storm?
You hang on tight. There was you don't let go. There was this old adage from the guy's name was Irving Johnson. And he's got this fantastic movie. If you ever get a chance to watch it, he sailed the Peking, which is this old boilerplate grain trade ship. It's now part of the Southport Maritime Museum in Manhattan. Southport, Southside, Seaport, Southside Seaport.
Yeah.
Something like that. Manhattan, like Peking. There's two ships, Peking and Wavertree. They're docked there on in Manhattan. Really cool little maritime museum. But Irving Johnson sailed that ship, and he made a video documentary of it back in like the 40s, 30s, 20s. Wow. A long time ago. It's all black and white with him narrating just his voice. This is shot on like a 8mm little camera kind of a thing.
Imagine, like, it must have been old friggin' camera. Like,
super cool stuff though, and that footage is just amazing. The film is called Round Cape Horn, but in that film he talks about when you're climbing super high up in the rigging, you just don't let go. It would be silly to let go. And you think about that and you're like, well, you're right. It would be just silly to let go. So you don't. You just hang on.
Is it like, but once you get like tired, I guess that's the point. It's like, no matter how tired or cold, it's like you're holding on to it, because that's literally, if you don't, you're dead kind of thing. Yep.
That's kind of what it comes to. Now, we did have harnesses on board. My first several years on Bounty, we had what was called a backbreaker harness, and it was this webbing strap that went around like where your belly button was, that had a couple of D-rings and a lanyard on it that you could clip into rigging once you climbed to the point where you were going to be, right, and you were stationed, and then you could clip into something, and it was kind of a lifeline, so to speak. But the harness was nicknamed a backbreaker because truly, if you did fall, you're going to probably break your back.
Right. God, backbreaker. What's protecting you? The backbreaker. God, you think about
later iterations of the safety upgrades of the ship, they got these 3-point harnesses that were like big climbing harnesses that were really nice. But at the same time, yes, you can rely on your harness to keep you safe and to hold you in place, but you don't want to have to get to that point. That is truly like a last-ditch thing. And in all the years that I sailed, nobody that I worked with ever fell out of the crew or fell out of the rigging. Nobody ever, on any of the vessels that I was directly on, nobody ever died. However, I knew of a handful of different sailors. One got washed overboard, a couple fell from the rigging. There was definitely some catastrophic instances where some sailors in the decade that I was sailing ended up losing their lives, unfortunately, but it was fairly few and far between, which was great.
It also kind of goes back to saying what you said. It's like you try to make yourself prepared so that didn't happen. So
Yeah.
that you didn't have, and I mean, would you say that's why you tried so hard is because in that instant where, I mean, we're going back all the way back to when people it was sinking and you had to call the Coast Guard. Was that the moment where like, okay, hey, this isn't a game.
Yeah.
Like, I need to be serious about this. I have fun, always have fun, but we're
Mhm.
always being life or death serious when things start hitting the fan.
Absolutely. And that was kind of that sort of underlying tone of all of that sailing and that voyaging in the background and everything that I had done was, you know, people die doing this kind of stuff. Like if you don't have the respect for the ocean, and if you don't have respect for the ship, and if you don't have the respect for the crew, and you're not working all together as one to be able to get through accomplish the goal, and even if you are, stuff can still go wrong and it can potentially be catastrophic. But if everybody is doing their absolute best, we should be okay.
Which, again, thank goodness.
And if everybody's making the right decisions and the right decisions with the right motivation, then, we should be okay. And the crazy things that happen, stuff's going to happen. But
No, yeah, it's just thank goodness that you had just capable people around and that there was that level of seriousness to it, though, because
yeah.
it could very change at any moment, and that's
Mhm.
it this is terrifying to even think about, though, to even entertain those thoughts and those ideas.
There's a lot of fun things in between
I
them.
know, I know, I know. We said all this like it's fun, but there was just like, and
It really is truly like some of the greatest experiences that I've had in my life. It was a blast. It was life changing. It was life altering. It was, I mean, all of it. It was just, it was amazing. It was wonderful. I miss those experiences. I miss the adventure. I miss the sailing aspect, the ocean, but a lot of it was really hard work and really kind of mentally exhausting and a little bit stressful. And again, at the end of the contract, you're looking for another job. I had actually right before the 2-year circumnavigation, or what was supposed to be the 2-year circumnavigation, there was financial issues and money and all kinds of other issues. So we made it through Northern Europe and the Mediterranean and a bunch of different countries and ended up coming back to the United States. So got a couple of Atlantic crossings on the Bounty. But before that trip, I was at my parents' house. It was frequently I'd pass through there, and it was a free place to crash, kind of a thing.
okay,
And I was getting ready for this what was supposed to be a 2-year voyage, and so they were throwing this going away party for me because I was going to be gone for 2 years, if not longer. We're sitting out in the backyard and we're having a bonfire, and one of my little cousins, I think he was about 10 or so at the time, maybe 12 or whatever. He's like, "So what do you do?" And I was like, "Well,
complicated.
that's an interesting question. That's a really good question. I do a lot of different things. So, I'm a sailor, so I sail the boat, but, that means that I do navigation, and that means that I have to make, work on the ship at times. So I do some carpentry things, and sometimes I do some electrical work, and sometimes I do some, this and some, there's a lot of different random jobs. You do a lot of painting, and you do a lot of, chasing water leaks. So you have to know all of this like maintenance ability of 17th century sailing vessels, which is kind of cool. And then you have both the traditional aspect, and then you have both the modern aspect of most of these vessels are Coast Guard certified to do some level of passenger transport or something. So everything is regulated by the U.S. Coast Guard because it's a vessel and that's how it works in order to keep everybody safe. So is that so I'm explaining this so he's like, "So what do you do?"
I know, you're like, bro, did you?
I'm like, "Okay, I know it's hard to answer that question." So, I was like, "Well, this particular voyage, I'm going to, we're going to steer the boat and navigate the boat, and we're going to take it to all these different countries, and we're going to cross the oceans, and we're going to go around the world." And he's like, "Okay, I kind of get that." And he's like, "So where do you live?" And I'm like, "Well, I live on the boat." He's like, well, like right now, where do you live? I'm like, well, right now I'm crashing with my parents because, I don't have a job at the moment, but I'm getting ready to go on to this
And
job.
it just immediately make you think like, do I have it all together? Like this kid's literally just like maybe like,
Yeah. And I'm like, according to my, so he's kind of quiet and he asked me a couple more questions and he's kind of quiet for a minute and he's just kind of in the story, conversation kind of travels. And all of a sudden he like butts in and he's like, so let me get this straight. You don't have a job. You don't have a home. You don't do anything. You're a bum. Oh, okay. I get it. And I'm like, I think I prefer vagabond.
yeah,
I think that's
sir,
more of
sir,
a
I'm a travel. It's there's some thing for it that we call people nowadays. Back in the day, like a little prick. Like I know he's family, but it's like, hey, whoa, buddy.
I
Like,
get where your brain came to that.
hey, like, but I get to, but I'm on a cool. Yeah, I'm a bum, but I'm on this shit. Like, look at all this cool stuff I'm
But
doing,
yeah.
man.
So
It's
it was a lot of really cool, fun experiences. And, it wasn't just all hardship and, all these like deep things. There was a lot of it that was crazy fun as well. Like we left Manhattan, jumping back to that, whatever year that was, voyage where we did the Great Lakes, we did the Erie Barge Canal, we leave Manhattan, we get down to Florida, and the officers on the ship at the time said, okay, who's interested in staying the next leg of what comes next? But they were being really cagey about what comes next.
okay.
They didn't really tell us what came next. And a handful of people were like, well, we're going to bugger off and we're going to do something else and we're going to go someplace else. But of the crew that wanted to stay, they made the choice and they kept 18. And I was one of them.
Okay.
So after they kept the 18, we set sail for Bayou Battery, Alabama. So we left St. Petersburg, Florida. We're heading up to Alabama. And on that trip, they told us that we had been contracted by Walt Disney Corporation to film Pirates of the Caribbean 2 and 3. So we're like,
Bruh.
this just got cool. So we get up to Steiner Shipyard and Bayou Battery. We did a massive refit on the boat, got it all set ready, or started the process of getting it set ready for filming of the Pirates movies. Like the first one came out, it was a blast. I remember watching that. I was living in Keys at the time. I went with one of the other crew, rode bikes to the theater in Key West and watched Pirates of the Caribbean. Had no idea what the film was going to be about, had absolutely no clue what Johnny Depp, or I had never been to Disney World, so I didn't know what the ride was.
And you haven't seen the first one, or like
That was the first one, the
okay,
very
okay.
first one when it first came out. Watching the film, I'm like, this is the coolest freaking thing I've ever seen. This is, of course, amazing. And I love this. And I love to be living on a old boat while I'm watching this film. This was just a cool experience. So then to be able to be kind of a part of the filming of making the second and third movies was just completely bizarrely cool to see the behind the scenes and to do the filming aspect. And we sailed from Alabama down to St. Vincent in the Grenadine Islands. And that trip was, so St. Vincent is in the Eastern Caribbean island chain,
Okay.
just north of Venezuela, Trinidad, Tobago.
Okay. Well, that's wow. And that how long did even journey take to go from there to there?
I want to say it was like 3 weeks ish, plus or minus.
Okay. Did you get to like meet any of the other actors like Bill Nye
Yeah.
so you met everybody was I mean you don't have to necessarily name drop. I mean like
No, it's all good.
who was a jerk and who was really nice? Were they all really nice?
Everybody was actually really cool. It was, again, it's a completely surreal experience. So the Bounty was the main picture boat. So we were like, and if you think about the first film, the first Pirates of the Caribbean film, like Johnny Depp, Jack Sparrow, he's running across the dock, he spins around and does that thing and then he makes his great escape and gets out to the boat. Like that whole set is a town that Disney built in a little bay called Wally Laboo.
Oh snap.
And it still exists, or rather, I don't know if they rebuilt it or what, but it was there. So we sail into this bay and it's the film set for Pirates. The arch with like the pirates hanging, ye be warned or whatever.
Yeah.
That is a true legitimate rock that just exists there. It was super cool. So we tied up to that pier. Like that's where our ship was tied up through a big chunk of the filming. So we were living on the Pirates of the Caribbean film set dressed as a, ship for the filming, and it was just a neat experience. I turned, I want to say 24 on the film set, something like that.
Man, that's got to be. And I mean, and this was I think this would have been before. No. Facebook would have been, yeah. Facebook's a thing by now. Okay, so
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, dude, did that like blow like? I bet you were just, I don't want. Yeah, you're bragging, probably like bro, like dudes, like look what I'm doing. I mean, did you get to
So
show pictures or not? Probably because it was a movie and it was behind the scenes stuff.
interestingly enough, I didn't have Facebook. I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't have a computer. I didn't have a laptop. I didn't have any means of communication. I had actually found somebody who let me borrow. No, I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't have an international cell phone at that time. I had when I got to St. Vincent, I bought a handful of international calling cards. And from the
Okay.
international calling cards, you can make phone calls. You dial your number and then it gives you a prompt, and then you can call whatever number that you want. But you have to buy a calling card that will patch you to the United States. And the hilarious part is it's the Caribbean, so it's an interesting place, and I love it to death. It was a phenomenal experience. Loved every bit of time. We were down there for several months. You wander around town, and it's just this cool experience of just traditional Caribbean island kind of stuff. It's just a lot of really cool, bizarre experiences. The calling card, I bought like 3 or 4 of them from a guy on a street. I was like, hey, where can I buy some calling cards? And somebody pointed me to this dude. So I was like, okay, here's some cash. He gives me some. Half of them were already used. I was like, okay, that's fair.
Thanks. I guess I need to learn that one. It's
Yeah,
it. Well, I mean, do you ever like kind of? I mean, again, you can't really like take stuff back. But you ever like look back and think, man, I kind of wish that I did have like able to take a picture, like to keep some of those memories.
I've got lots of photographs.
Okay.
I've got a lot of really fun photographs of the film set and pirates and sailing and all of my sailing adventures and things like that. And it was just, yeah, it was a blast. The pirates pictures, like there's, the night that Johnny came on the ship with, what was his name? It was Johnny Depp and
I'm trying to remember too. It was Barbosa.
Jack Davenport was the other guy.
No, that was I'm trying to remember.
He was the lieutenant guy who was like chasing them.
Yeah, yes. Okay, him.
Yeah, that guy. He, and of course, like all the other, you get all the other, it's different points. You kind of run into all of them. I remember having a conversation one night. His name was Mackenzie Crook. He's the guy with the wooden eyeball.
Okay, yeah, him. Yeah, okay.
And super nice guy. He just wanted to talk about his 2 daughters, and he was like showing me pictures and just kids, I want to say.
What cutie.
So yeah, it was just super cool. And just that whole experience, again, you're like this young 20-something-year-old doing this, but everybody is just there to do a job and to hang out and have fun and, get the work done. And it was just kind of a surrealistic, bizarre kind of 20-something experience.
It's well, and okay, and I'll say this. I'll definitely cut this out. We're at our technical 2-hour mark. How much time do you technically have left? Can you keep going?
I can keep going. Do you mind if I take a 5-minute, or even just?
We'll do 5 minutes right now. You come back, and we'll. I'm gonna end it right here.
Sure. Oh yeah.
And that's always got to be careful asking questions off this thing because we call those like golden nuggets where it's just like you'll say something awesome and we didn't record it, whatever. But that's just incredible. I mean, like and there are so many people that love Pirates of the Caribbean. So the fact that you get to have that experience and such an already unique experience to be like a seaman of this old boat, but to be a part of this dynasty, this Disney dynasty almost. You're like, yep.
Yeah.
Is your name in the credits at all, or did they give you guys credit for anything?
It's been a long time since I've actually watched the films. I know that there's a lot of spots in the second film that, like, if I'm watching it, I can point and be like, "Oh, that's me. Oh, that's me. Oh, that's my face." That kind of thing. There was actually, it was the day of my birthday. Ironically enough, I showed up for set dressing and costume that morning because we get up at like 5 o'clock in the morning and go get whatever costume that they wanted us in that day. And because they used us as a bunch of other things, our contract as the main picture boat, they used us as crew for a handful of different things. So some of our crew, they'd put in the boats, they'd row them around, and they'd use us for climbing and the rigging all the time because we were the experts on set that would be able to do those kind of things. And
Right.
so I showed up that day for the day of my birthday, and the guy handing out the costumes, he was like, can you climb in boots? And I was like, dude, I'll do it naked if you want.
Yeah, exactly. You want a naked pirate?
Like, I can climb in whatever you want, man.
I'll do it.
And he was like, we're going to put you into a different costume. And I was like, okay, cool, whatever. So they send me to wardrobe and they get me in this like black leather outfit. And I'm like, it's the Caribbean. This is going to be god awful hot. Okay.
Oh God. Okay.
I'm up for it. And then they send me to hair and makeup and they shave my beard and they cut my hair. And I'm like, okay, this is kind of cool, And then they hold a mirror up and I looked awfully familiar. They dressed me as Orlando Bloom's stunt double for the day.
Oh,
For like doing shipboard climbing and whatnot. So it was kind of funny.
Unfortunately, IMDb has not given you credit, or at least I have not been able to.
As far as ending up in the credits, none of us happened by name. I believe the only thing that happened in the credits was thanks to Captain Robin Walbridge and the HMS Bounty and the crew, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
Robin was the captain who I sailed under my entire time on board the Bounty, and he was a good guy. I learned a lot from Robin. I have a lot of respect for that man. In 2012, the Bounty sank in the eye of Hurricane Sandy off of the East Coast. Yeah. So Captain Robin and a deckhand passed away, unfortunately.
R.I.P.
Robin's body was never recovered. They never found him, but they found everybody else. Everybody else survived in lifeboats. That is a wild tragedy, and got to meet some of the crew that was on board during one of the memorial services that was held in Robin's honor afterwards. But yeah, unfortunately, the Bounty is lost.
Oh, that's insane to think about. I mean, is it truly the point what they say is like, all captains go down with their ships, though? Is that kind of like when it ended up happening? It's like everyone was able to get off safely, but he was
it was not. So that whole adage of the captain goes down with the ship is, I have a captain's license. I've captained and driven boats for a long time, and I've never met a captain who is going to die because their boat sank. Kind of like,
I'm glad you say that, because it'd just be like, man, yeah, captain's hard, dude.
It's not worth dying over. It's just a boat. I mean, it's so much more than just a boat. It's so much more than just a ship. It's so much more than that, but it's not worth life. It's not worth life. I've heard that adage numerous times, and to be honest, I don't know where that originated from. I'd be really interested to kind of do I'm sure somebody knows where that came about, and it's probably one of those old maritime things of, back during the royalty days of, well, if you're not going to come back with a ship, you best not come back. Maybe that's a thing. I don't know.
Maybe. It's, man, it's crazy. A little side note, like, I don't want to go too much into it though, but I remind me at the end of this episode, have you heard of I think it's the Concordia? I think it's like an Italian. You heard about the whole fiasco? Yeah. There's a little it's called Internet Historian. He just does like deep dives of stuff, and he just described all like the details of like kind of what led up to that kind of horrific kind of crash and all that nasty stuff. And if you're mildly curious, I'll send it your way, just because you ever especially when anyone's even talking about boat stuff, like, you ever see people like always crying like, that's wrong, way to not, or like, that's not they're not doing that one correctly, or they're going to. You ever do that stuff? Watching boat media?
There's any number of kind of historical accuracies. The pirate movies, actually, they did a really good job about historical accuracy of when they were. There's a lot of these cool little snippets in the film, and most of the ones that stick out in my mind were the scenes that we were in, because you don't just shoot a scene 2 or 3 times, you shoot a scene like 40 times. And, after you do the exact same thing for like 3 minutes over and over again, over the course of a couple of hours, it just kind of sticks in your head. But there's these little quips in the film that we would hear where, it was that was legitimate. That was how they would run a sailing vessel. I mean, to some extent, a lot of it is, of course, Disneyfied and, grandiose and,
Right.
all of that kind of thing. But some of it was legit and was kind of cool. So, props to the mouse for doing their homework.
For now, it makes me think like back in the day. Well, I mean, I didn't think most Pirates of the Caribbean movies now just pretty much like green screen and
I'm sure, yeah. But yeah, it was bizarre experience.
So you got to this incredible experience. You did eventually, and I kind of know this question. I know this kind of situation. The audience doesn't, but what about, like you mentioned, you met your wife on, was it specifically this boat or was it a different boat?
It was the Bounty. I've sailed just over about a dozen sailing vessels in my career. 14, maybe 15. I don't know. I'd have to sit down and count them all out, but
insane.
I didn't live on land for a decade. I jumped from boat to boat to boat. We finished filming Pirates. We sailed back to the United States. We were in St. Pete for a short while. I had just been, on contract with the ship for a while. So I took a little vacation, a little break, and jumped in my car. And I don't know where I went or what I did, but usually in between boat contracts, I would go backpacking, go hiking, go drive and visit some friends, just kind of take a little bit of a break.
Right.
So I was probably doing one of those, or I had taken another job somewhere else. I don't truly remember exactly what happened. Oh, I actually went back to the Keys and I did some delivery work to and from the Bahamas.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, that's right. I went back to, I did a run from Fort Lauderdale out to Nassau. And then I took a guy's boat out to Nassau. And then I went from Key Largo out to Freeport. I did a couple of trips to and from the Bahamas just doing delivery work because it's good money and it was kind of fun. So made a couple of Gulf Stream crossings.
Okay.
And then when Bounty was ready to start sailing again, I jumped back on board and took her back up the East Coast. So interestingly enough, that was when Cherie showed up, who is now my wife. She had seen the ship when it was tied up in St. Pete, Florida, which was one of the spots that she frequently, that the vessel, the vessel, not she, the woman, would hang out. So the Bounty would kind of tie up in St. Pete, Florida and hang out there for chunks of time periodically in between, sailing runs wherever she was going. So anytime the boat was tied up, I would usually jump somewhere else and work other boats that were working, not just sitting.
Right.
Because I get bored easily.
I mean, yeah.
She saw the ship and called the phone number, decided to give this thing a try. She didn't have any sailing experience, had never really done anything like this before. And much to the chagrin of her mother, decided that she was going to go have this sailing experience. When she showed up, we were in Oyster Bay, New York.
Okay.
So up on Long Island, Oyster Bay, cool little town.
So she's from New York. Like that's where you guys were located. That's where she saw the kind of help wanted sign or something.
She saw the help wanted sign in St. Pete, Florida.
Okay.
And called. And by the time she was ready to get on board, we were already on our way up to New York. So, because.
So how did she get there then?
So she lived in Chicagoland. She got a flight out to New York, was supposed to get picked up by one of the office person for the ship, Margaret, lovely woman, love Margaret to death. Shout out to Margaret.
Sure, Margaret.
Margaret had a family emergency something, so she couldn't get up to New York to pick Cherie up from the airport. So Cherie was in charge of finding her own way from whatever airport she flew into in New York to Oyster Bay, New York, which is, public transit can get you out there to some extent, but can potentially be kind of challenging. Well, her mom, this is Cherie's first time doing anything big, adventurous, anything like that. She had just finished a bachelor's degree at college, and her mom had connections with a car livery service and got her a car to take her from the airport to the ship. So what showed up was like a limo, like a Lincoln Town kind of thing.
So this is the first time you're seeing her. So this woman comes out of a limo. Like, what's up?
So the best part is that she's got her backpack of everything she owns. She's about to get, and she knows kind of what the ship is about. And she met some of the crew. So she gets and this car is taking her to the ship, and it's, early morning, and she's like, you need to stop right here. I'm getting out. And he's like, no, I will take you the whole way. And she's like, no, you need to leave me here right now. I cannot show up to these people in a limo. I'm like,
they will roast me, dude. Do you understand this? Like,
please just leave me alone. I'm going to be fine. So she wanders on board the ship with her stuff. She rolls up in her limo, and it was just it was awesome. So we're eating lunch at the time. We're down on the galley, and this young girl walks in, and we knew that a crew member was showing up at some point. We actually hadn't had a female crew member in a bit, so it was smelly and foul language. And
if anything, I'm more thinking like, what about the whole, you're a bunch of dudes on a boat and there's a woman here? Like, did they immediately be like, hubba hubba, or like, hey, how's it going?
Dibs.
Dibs. Yeah, dibs.
It was, there's in the sailing world, there's definitely a lot of sort of partnerships that happen, and then a lot of temporary partnerships, and then a lot of those kind of things. The
community partnerships.
Yeah, it's, you put a bunch of young people into small tight quarters, and things happen.
Yeah, a little
so
bit.
The hilarious part is she showed up, and she's an incredibly strong-willed woman. She is really smart, really just self-confident and amazing. And a couple of the crew were like, yeah. And she was like, absolutely not.
Just shut it down right away. She's
like, oh yeah, 100%. Like, that's awesome. That's not happening. No chance. That's gross, kind of a thing.
Okay.
But, yeah, it was just kind of funny. So her and I were put into a situation where, usually a new crew member shadows a seasoned crew member to kind of learn the basics, and, you just kind of teach as you go, kind of a thing. It's all experiential education.
Right.
And her and I spent a lot of time just, in the rigging and working on different projects. And this is how you run the bilge pumps. And this is how you, start the generator. And this is how you transfer fuel from the main tanks into the day tanks. And this is how you do these kind of things. And this is how,
it's like the thing in the pottery scene in Ghosts, where you're just like,
The hilarious part is she kept asking me how to pump the bilges. And I was like, well, it's kind of a tricky system. So I'd show it to her, and there's a bunch of valves and levers, and it's a thing. You got to prime the pump, and then you got to jettison, and you got to get the pump and raw water in, and then transition from raw water into the bilge. And then, there's definitely a trick to it. And she kept asking me over and over again. And I was like, it's not really that hard. Like, she really just not getting it. And then years later, after we got married, we're telling the story with my aunt and uncle, and she starts cracking up. She was like, oh, I knew how to pump the bilges. I just really liked looking at your butt.
Okay, because so that's always want to know is like, who liked the previous, because she shut it down right away, but it's like
It
obviously
wasn't.
you did something. Like you
It
were.
wasn't. I I I have always been a staunch, well, as much as I could humanly do so, a staunch person of like, let's not date crew members. I'm not really into relationships. I didn't want to be in relationships. I just was having this really fun experience of being out on the water and sailing and being just me. And I knew that a relationship was going to be challenging and would probably change all that,
Yeah,
which it
imagine.
did, but worth it.
Which no, and
So
I mean a couple things. I know you're sorry you're talking though, but I mean
it's all good.
it, especially when you did bring her up. I always kind of wondered like how. I mean, you've been on the boat a while, and I mean, like you said, try as much as you can. It probably got lonely. I mean, like it.
Oh
Did
yeah.
you have relationships, or did you have girlfriends hang out, or did you primarily just it was just you in the sea and sometimes a female?
I mean, there were everybody on the ship had different kind of iterations of different things, and it depended on kind of where they were at.
Are you trying to like very like safely trying to navigate something gross? Like, is that what we're?
So there were crew members who were very promiscuous. There were crew members who would have a relationship with one individual and then that wouldn't really work out. And they end up, the official rule on board the ship was no relationships. If there is anything that causes drama, we ask everybody involved to leave.
Okay,
So
interesting.
that was kind of the other sort of underlying thing is you don't want to create drama. You don't want to create this chaotic thing that ends up getting everybody fired.
Right, makes sense.
Is that's not cool either.
We're trying to live. We're not trying to die, literally.
Yeah, that was also sort of one of my motivations to not get into, you know, these chaotic. There was at one point a Venn diagram that was drawn and the overlapping individuals of who has been with who, and that started to get really weird really quickly.
And like, okay, there's too many people intersecting with these too many people, and we need to just.
Yeah.
Well, because I wanted to ask, was there ever a? I mean, God, I don't want to say this. Like that, did you have maybe a bad experience where that truly kind of made you like not want to do that because of the drama, or you just had like maybe a bad long distance relationship, or
Yes and yes and yes. There was a there was a relationship with an individual who caused a lot of drama both for me and for her and for what turned out to be her other boyfriend, and
oof,
it was a bunch of really weird kind of, it was all of the reasons that drama happens were all the reasons that that drama happened, and it just kind of, you know, that's why those rules are, you know, rules quote unquote are put in place. But it just, when you're on a boat in the middle of the ocean and those kind of situations are happening, there's no place to hide, and it
yeah.
just has the possibility to kind of blow up and create a whole lot of chaos that then you just are stuck with, and that's not fun.
Which I totally get it, and especially because like it's like, and I don't know, and guys, I don't know if you're like kind of following me, obviously, but just really kind of realizing how terrifying, and like the ocean, like I said, you can't underestimate it. Like at a moment's notice, we have hurricanes, giant storms, people can be drowning. It's like it's cold, it's wet, it'll kick your ass. It's just this giant thing, and on top of all this, it can cause isolation, or you're on a friggin' boat. And
Yeah.
like you mentioned, the soup thing, it's like it's funny because it's like you're like, oh, it's just dinner, but it's like, no, bro, this is what we're eating. If we spill this, we're eating you, kind of the thing. I mean, you know. So it
It's
just good on you for like trying to at least
things
keep that
can turn
drama.
south pretty quickly, and
Exactly.
you try really hard as best you can not to end up down that road. But anyway, so met my wife, we
Right.
sailed together, kind of started this budding relationship. We had a couple of really cool, you know, date type experiences. but never anything like physical, or, it was just really truly enjoying each other's company and building this connection, which was really nice, and nothing that I'd ever really experienced to that extent or to that depth before, which was, for me, living this, solitary life and, living the life that I was kind of frightening, and, all those kind of things of like, I saw a lot of things in my life changing, and I had always known that I'd always told myself that sailing was temporary. I was going to do it until it was no longer fun, it was no longer lucrative, or it was no longer justifiable.
Right.
And it actually met a couple of those criteria. It was always fun. It was always enjoyable. The lucrative aspect of it, I always left every contract with more money in the bank than I started the contract. And I was always very specific and very diligent to make sure that I was good with my money to be able to do that. Even when I was making $46 a week, I always landed with more cash than I had before I started. So you learn to live within your means when, $46 after a month of sailing, you've got about $180 in the bank, and you're like, yeah, all right.
Yeah, dude, we made $140 and I'm worse for wear, but we did it, man. Heck yeah. Oh my goodness.
So we sailed the boat up to Maine. We dropped the boat off in the shipyard. This is right before the 2-year circumnavigation. So the boat was going to go up in the shipyard in Maine. Okay. And then I had a job that was already lined up at the end of the delivery. So as soon as I got to Maine, I had a couple of weeks to get myself to LA somewhere.
Okay.
I had some work in Long Beach. I don't remember. So some LA. So I had some work lined up out there.
Do you remember specifically what it was, or?
I was going to be working with a guy who had a private business working for security of some of the private vessels in and around the harbor. I forget which harbor it was, but I was essentially driving boat, running security for this guy who had this company where he did this thing. Okay. And I got out there, and it turned out that it didn't really pan out to be what he sold it as. And he wasn't really going to pay me what he said he was going to, which this is not uncommon in the boating industry either. Like, you show up to do a thing and somebody hires you, and then it turns out not to be the thing that they told you it was going to be. Like, for instance, I had a guy who hired me to be the captain of I was going to drive a sailboat in Florida, and the guy says, "Oh, well, the boat's in the shipyard. Go meet up with the boat. We've just got a week or two before the contract, or before the season starts." And I showed up, and the boat was on the hard, and the hull was missing. Like, the hull is the the entire, like, it was just
like
not
the top
there.
layer, right? Or yeah.
Not just so, like, the deck is the part that you walk around on. The hull is the actual, like, part that sits in the water.
Like the inside, yeah, right.
That part was missing. It just wasn't there.
Is that technically a boat if that's gone?
It
like just because at this point it's just a floating piece of wood.
That's a good question. So I called the guy and I was like,
bro,
can you explain to me exactly what you had intended for, like, we had talked about me captaining your boat, and he's like, yeah, as soon as it's done. I was like, oh, dude, this is not gonna. But of course, at the time, I didn't have any other thing lined up, and I didn't have any other money, and it was cash. So I lived on board the boat while
the boat that was being built.
Yeah, well, it was an old boat that was being rebuilt. So I pitched my tent inside the missing hull, because the first night that I slept, I woke up to cockroaches eating my fingers.
Actually, that's terrifying. I didn't know that they could do that.
Cockroaches will eat your fingernails. Yeah, I felt things, and I just kept like swatting them away. So I pitched my backpacking tent inside the boat and lived on my backpacking stove and hose showers. And yeah,
Dude,
I
you
again,
saint, my guy. Like,
that
absolutely
was
not.
that was an experience that once I was there doing that, I was like, this is temporary, and I will find a better job.
Man, good on you, because I'd be like, no,
But it
this
was
is like,
cash, you know.
but man, but the bugs, dude. I think that's where I draw the line. Man, I can't, like, dude, I
Done
have
by
things
cockroaches.
eating me. No, like, we're not doing this.
Yeah, chewed on by cockroaches in the middle of the night. Less than ideal circumstance. Not one of my most favorite nights.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, so boats do have a pest problem. Rats, bugs, like,
Oh yeah.
how do you fight that? Can you fight
Oh,
that?
yeah. Yeah. It's if you can mitigate the things coming on board, then it's a lot easier. It was not uncommon to like fumigate the crap out of the boat. Once you could get them gone, then it was easy to keep them gone until you got back to shore. And then it was just a matter of really trying hard to prevent them from coming back on board.
Right, but just man,
But
because
when it hits, it's brutal. Like when cockroaches happen, that's a mess. So, you're always trying to kind of fight that. But it was, if you keep a really clean boat and you're really diligent about what you're bringing on board, then you can mitigate that
you can
process.
make it do better. I just hate that sentence. I'm gonna be very frank, because like it's echoing in my mind. You woke up to cockroaches biting your fingers. That's
Yeah, they were
no
eating
thanks.
my fingernails.
No, thank you. Just
Yeah.
because I mean, I was in Cali years ago, and from a certain like areas, just that they, no matter how many times you treat for roaches, they always seem like they're there. Like you can
Yeah.
bomb again and again, but they always find a way to come up through the drains or something. But just like to
Mm.
be that bad, where they're just, and it makes sense because there's no food, but your food or your just good. We're good. Okay,
I
but okay,
didn't realize that cockroaches would actively eat your fingernails while they were attached to your body.
that's
I
man,
didn't realize that was a thing.
no,
So
thank
that
you.
that experience, yeah, that was different.
So how do we get off the boat? So
So
yeah, what happens then?
you're gonna bomb. You're gonna have some less than successful experiences, but everything is an experience and everything is a learning opportunity. And you just kind of, okay, well, I'm going to do that better next time. And
Yeah,
ironically, that's one of the things my wife and I joke about all the time is, well, we could have done that better and we'll do it better next time.
there you
We did
go.
a backpacking trip where, we took too much stuff and forgot a bunch of important stuff. And we're like, well, we'll do that better next time. It's going to be fine. That kind of positive outlook, you try to have that as much as you can. So anyway, her and I, we meet. We had this connection up the Atlantic seaboard, get to Maine. I headed out to whatever work that I was doing, kind of bounced around, did a couple of different other things, got back to the ship, didn't know that she was going to be there. And all of a sudden, I walk on board and she's there. And I was like, oh, okay, hi. And we kind of reconnected our relationship after that. And we ended up doing most of the European voyage together. She ended up getting injured and flew home from Spain. We had hit, I think, 7 countries at that point,
Yeah.
just kind of sailing around parts of Europe. And she had to fly home from Spain. I continued the voyage through the Mediterranean and a handful of other places. Then that was when we got official word from the office that we were going to go back to the United States, and did New Year's Eve in Tenerife in the Canary Islands, where we were watching the fireworks. We were docked right next to the barge that did the fireworks.
Right.
So we had our fire hoses and we wet down the whole ship. And literally the fireworks, like this massive, huge fireworks display, is going off literally on top of our heads. We're getting pelted by all the little plastic and cardboard pieces from all the fireworks, which was super cool experience.
Yeah.
Just stand there with all these things going off. You always want to be closer to the big ones, and you'd feel it like percussion through your chest. And the safety aspect of it, like, could have been safer, but We all were fine.
We could have done that better.
Nothing burnt down. Nobody died. It was a good time. Good
Right.
times were had by all. We sailed back across the Atlantic, and Cherie was actually waiting on the dock, unbeknownst to me, when the ship came in, caught some dock lines, and said hi, and that was it. We've been inseparable since. We actually got married very shortly after that.
Okay. Because that's what I want to know is when did that like okay, this is being much more serious than just hey, boat mates, like
We got married in 2008, so it's been a stretch now. And
15 years.
yeah. We just had our 15-year anniversary in August. So
Mazel tov. There you go. That's awesome.
Thanks. So right after that voyage, I think it was May that we got back to the United States. We went to Chicago, her hometown in Chicago, got a job on a sailboat up in Chicago, worked that for the summer, got married like right away because we were planning on taking another contract. I had lined up a contract that started that fall in the Bahamas. So we got married kind of quickly. So we got engaged. I think it was Memorial Day that we got engaged, Memorial Day weekend. And then by August, we were married. And a bunch of my family was like, just because she's pregnant, you don't have to marry her. She's not pregnant, but thank you for your support.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's so kind of you guys too.
At least on the bright side, you got to go ahead and now you can get her pregnant. Just like, hey, you just no more waiting. Let's just get to it.
Surprisingly enough, the pregnant part took a long time. We actually have a 2-year-old, so that's our first and likely going to be only after a whole lot of science.
I can imagine. Banana Slug, right? I remember her.
Banana Slug, yeah.
Was this her first? Did you guys take her trick or treating?
We did. She dressed up as a giraffe. She loves animals. She's all about monkeys and giraffes, and yeah, so we got her this we did a shirt with little stick-on giraffe pieces and a little headband with the ears and horns, and it was cute. It was fun. She's kind of shy, so she didn't want to walk up to strangers' houses, but once she realized that she would like get treats or like little
he's like, yes, please,
gifts or whatever, then it was she was like, okay, I can kind of see how this could be a thing, maybe.
He's like, I get how we can make this exactly. Well, okay, so before we get to the lavabos, I mean, how did you guys get off the boat? I mean, you guys got married, you do potentially another contract. I mean, when does someone say like, I'm done with this, no more, please? We got married barefoot on a beach on the shores of Lake Michigan. Family was there. Nice experience, really fun wedding, had a blast. And then shortly after that, it was that fall, I think it was by November, we were down in Florida again, ready to head out to the Bahamas. So the gentleman who I knew of, phenomenal human being, one of the most incredible humans that I have ever had the privilege of knowing. This guy, his name is Joe Maggio, or was. He passed away, unfortunately. He has a phenomenal story. He was special forces during the 60s in the military, had this extensive military career. I won't get into the details, but he was just this incredible human being. He always had a passion for sailing. He lived on sailboats most of his life. So in between his military contracts and his military experiences and the things that he used to do, he was all kinds of clandestine type things for several years. He would live on his sailboat to be off grid so that he couldn't be found with safety. He wrote a book of some of his experiences, but he did it living out of a caravan traveling through Europe off grid because he didn't want to be found. Wow.
That kind of guy.
All right.
Cool guy.
Fun.
Yeah. So he had a couple of boats. He had one in Florida at the time that I knew him. He had one in Florida and one in the Bahamas. And he hired Cherie and I to run the Bahama boat. That was the one that I'd applied for. So we got the contract as captain and mate, head out to the Bahamas. It was an 80-foot wooden schooner sailing through the Abaco Islands, living on this boat. It was this old 80-foot boat. It had no electronics, no GPS. The compass didn't work. When I'm applying for the job, of course, I know to ask more questions. I don't just assume, I ask more questions, right? So I'm like, oh, what kind of navigation? What kind of this? What kind of that? And he's like, nah, you don't need any of that. You're going to read the water.
Sir.
And I was like,
bro.
okay, Cap. Well, sure. I respect your, okay, I get that. I've never relied on that before, nor am I familiar with that as a navigational practice. And he's like, it's fine. I'll teach you. It's really easy. Okay, sure. Let's do this. So we sailed on this boat. It was actually 80 feet, sounds amazing, but and the boat was really cool. It was built in the 60s on one of the outlying islands in the Bahamas before they had electricity. This island didn't get telephones until the 90s.
Well, okay, all right. Dang.
In the 60s, they still didn't have electricity on the island, so they were still doing everything by hand. The guy who built the boat, his shipwright, his name was William H. Albury. When the boat was his largest, and it was named as his namesake, so we sailed the William H. Albury. And it was the cool experience where he just kind of look at it and eyeball it and do it. And it was just beautiful. It was an incredible boat. A lot of fun to sail. Every different wooden boat has its own character and its own idiosyncrasies and its own feel and its own kind of spirit. And it was really neat experience to be able to sail that vessel in that place where it was built by that guy and those people. And the Albury shipwrights still work in they build fiberglass boats these days. They do it barefoot in shorts without a t-shirt, spraying fiberglass. These guys are gnarly. Good for you guys.
Exactly.
Like
good for
smoking
you.
cigarettes, spraying, fiberglass. Like, you go for it. You guys live your best life. I love it.
Yeah.
But they still build amazing boats. If you ever get a chance to head out to the Abaco Islands, head out to Manowar Key, you can reach the Albury families. Everybody who lives there, still amazing places, still pretty incredible. So we would take our charters all around the Abaco Islands. We'd pick up and leave from Marsh Harbor, but we'd be gone for 7 days. So we'd kind of tour all over the Abacos, and that was a blast. So we did that for.
Man, I've always wanted to go to the Bahamas. It looks gorgeous. Like,
it's incredible. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful place, beautiful people, amazing experiences. It's these random things where you're so close to the United States, but yet so far away.
Yeah.
Like, watermelon showed up one day on one of the boats. So all of your food comes from boats from the United States. So watermelon showed up, and they were like $50 for a watermelon, because for whatever reason, it was stupid expensive to ship a watermelon to the Bahamas. So
yeah, man.
Everybody's like, do you want some? And I was like, not for $50. I know I can get that for $3 in Florida.
Yeah, I'm going to just wait and bide my time so I can actually enjoy, not to friggin' pay that much.
Yeah, right.
Well, man, spam, much of a spam eater or enjoyer?
I think I've eaten it like 3 times in my life.
Okay.
Maybe 3, maybe 4. So it's nothing that I'm completely averse to. I'll eat pretty much anything, but the Bahamas was a lot of fresh fish. I was spearfishing a lot of fresh crab, a lot of fresh lobsters, because part of the charter is I would take the passengers to different coral reefs and we would spearfish lionfish, or a couple of times, you get big mutton snapper, or, just kind of, you try to live sort of a, existence that way. Plus it was fun for me. That's the part about living that lifestyle that I enjoy, is bag of rice, a fresh fish, and some coconut, and I'm happy.
That's all you need. Can you imagine if you didn't like fish, how much you probably would hate your job even more? Well,
that's what all the cans of spam are for.
There you go. Or the roaches, if you can catch
the
them.
roaches. Yeah, absolutely.
But how do we get off the boat though? How does your wife say, bro, or she say it, or you say, I'm done doing this?
It was actually something that just sort of it happened. Again, I always told myself that it was a temporary thing, that once it got to the point where it was no longer feasible to do so, then we weren't going to do it anymore, or I wasn't going to do it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So that was about 2010. So that was actually at the worst of the sort of US recession at the time. So a lot of boats, '09, that was '09.
Right.
So the big recession had happened and most boats weren't hiring crew. So I couldn't find work. I actually applied to 300 jobs over the course of several months' time. And the only thing that I could get that was even a nibble was in the Gulf of Mexico, working for the oil rigs as what was called a wiper.
Okay. What do they do?
Which is like, to be honest, I have no idea.
They wipe, I think.
It was a job on a boat. And for me, it wasn't that I needed to work on a boat. I wanted to be doing something that was fulfilling and enjoyable for me. So that's why I liked sailing. And I didn't want to take a job on a boat. And this is just for me. I have no disrespect for the people that do that. I actually have an immense amount of respect for the mariners and the seagoing individuals and the sailors that are working those kind of jobs. But
right.
I'm not going to be fulfilled in a steel box in an engine room, bouncing around doing something like that. That wasn't the passion for me. So we looked at a couple of different things and just kind of wasn't panning out. We weren't getting the bites that we wanted. And we spent several months just kind of living off of the savings of trying to figure out what was coming next. And finally, by December, I was like, okay, I'm going to go to nursing school. That was always my backup plan. And Sheree goes, well, that sounds like fun. I'll do that too. And then we'll be travel nurses together. And then we can still travel and we can do all these adventurous things. And so we went online in December up in Chicago. I was crashing on her mom's couch at the time. And no, we had a little apartment. We got a little apartment. That's right. We did.
Did you guys work like a side job to like pay for that though? Or like how did you like
couple. Yeah, there was a couple. There was Sheree. I was working for a boat downtown Chicago. Sheree was selling. She was selling, college tuition to private universities.
Okay.
Cold calling students who click a link on some random website to essentially harass them into signing up for college tuition.
Hey, I mean, whatever pays the bills, like, hey, I mean, it works. It works.
It was cash. I think she lasted for like a month.
Thank God, because I can imagine like this, like, I mean, people call us and they're pissed off. I can imagine just them cold calling and it's like, leave us alone, like just all the stuff. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah, that job didn't last for very long. And it's you do whatever job that you can. It comes down to a point of you have to work, you have to support yourself. So you do whatever job that you can.
Yeah,
so I happened to be able to get in with a boat in Chicago. I knew the owner, I knew the captain and the crew. So I just kind of jumped in with them and no worries. So yeah, called in, found a university. I didn't have any previous college degree. So I was starting from scratch, essentially. She had this bachelor's in psychology. So she was starting a little bit ahead of me. We wanted to go to nursing school, found a university in Florida. By January 4th, we were living in Florida, started school, started working at a restaurant as wait staff. Actually, to get our apartment, Sheree worked at Home Depot in the paint department for a month.
Thank you, Sheree. We appreciate the
Lasted
sacrifice.
a month. It was awesome. So she's a paint specialist.
This entire time must have been pretty, like, I don't want to say terrifying, but I mean, like, to go from this complete lifestyle of being on the boat, this mindset of like, because again, you have to probably have that same mindset, like we have to like last and do this, to now you're landlocked, going to school, this totally different thing. I mean, you think was it kind of easier to get there because you've done this thing as long as you have, and now you're just, again, it's exciting. So now it's like, cool, I get to try my all this stuff I know for something else, or do you think because of the boat having to kind of make you just kind of be moment by moment, kind of keep your time for those weeks, months at a time, that's what kind of helps you maybe last the education route?
It's all that self-reliance thing. It's the self-reliance and the perseverance that you sort of learn and connect with through that I've picked up not only through sailing, but all those other, experiential education type things throughout the lifespan is, you have to be self-reliant. You have to be able to get through to be, functional and, take care of yourself and the people that rely on you, whether that's your ship's crew or your family or your whatever. So having that kind of drive was always something that sort of, I don't know, has always been part of me. But the jump to nursing school was really frightening. I remember sitting in my first class. My very first class was anatomy and physiology, and the teacher's aide is sitting there and she's like, as you know, da 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 da, and as you know, da 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 da. And I was like, holy shit, I don't know any of that.
I don't know exactly. Like,
and I'm
no,
like
no,
frantically
I don't know.
flipping through pages, and I'm trying to write down every word she says. And I look around, and everybody's kind of looking at each other like, what the hell did we just get ourselves into? And I was like, all right, let's get some work done.
That's just
And
incredible,
just
though.
kind of hunkered down. And Cherie and I actually graduated with, there were 3 people in our graduating class that graduated summa cum laude, which is with highest honors. So we had the 3 highest GPAs in the school, Cherie, myself, and this one other student. We had almost 4.0s throughout all of nursing school. We did an accelerated bachelor's degree, which meant we finished the bachelor's in nursing in 21 months, start to finish, which was insane. Graduated, we walked across the stage. We got our diplomas. We moved to Chicago 3 days later. We got jobs in Chicago, and then we applied to a doctoral program. We graduated our doctoral program 4 years later, and so we both have our doctorate. We're both nurse practitioners. And we just kind of, again, it's that drive of just put your head to it. If you make your decision, okay, this is what I'm doing. This is what we're going to do, and we're going to make it work.
It's, I don't know. I don't want to say it's supernatural. I mean, kind of. I mean, granted, it's just, you're just like, hey, sheer force of will. But I mean, like, I don't know. You got to be at least a little in awe that not a lot of people can do that. A lot of people can put their nose to the grindstone and be able to go on boats and on just like those insanely long, difficult, draining, hardworking routes to now you're going to take on education. Like, it'd be one thing if all you did was sailing, but to do sailing and then education and now you're doctoring. I mean, again, dude, that's I don't know, man. You either got bit with the super smart bug or was a self-reliance. But I mean, there's just something in you like that's really impressive.
It's been a pretty wild journey. It's been a lot of fun. There's been a lot of challenges, a lot of hardships, but whatever you're faced with, you figure out how to navigate it, and you just keep making steps and moving forward.
Do you think that's the secret? I mean, if we could just boil it, I mean, that's the problem. We're talking about infinite, difficult questions of the cosmos, but like as far as that's how you get there is just moment by moment and just kind of bracing as best you can. Sometimes you fall off the boat. Sometimes you find buried treasure. It's a little bit of everything, but you just have to deal with it moment by moment.
That's really all it comes down to is, and I know this is like the silliest metaphor for, solving the
We like silly metaphors.
challenging of the ethos of, but yeah, you essentially, you can't look at the problem in its grandest manifestation. You have to break it down into its simplest components. And I used to say this all the time, small achievable goals. You can't set the goal of, I'm going to circumnavigate the globe. You have to set the challenge or the goal of, I'm going to, today I'm going to do this. This is my goal for the day. And I'm going to try to achieve that goal for the day. I used to do this with all my diabetic patients, small achievable goals.
Mm.
I've been a family practice medical provider now for 7 years. I don't know how
Okay.
many years it's been. But I used to tell my diabetic patients all the time is small achievable goals. You can't get your diabetes in control today, but you can make steps today to get your diabetes in control down the road. And every step that you take today is something. And sometimes you're going to have a great day and sometimes you're going to have a bad day, but that's okay. The bad days you chalk up to a bad day and then try to make tomorrow better.
I think that's what we can really chew on, I would say. I think and that's not only very reasonable, but I think that's also like something to kind of almost look forward to. And I mean, I'll tell you with this cast has very much been kind of like, just like you said, just small achievable goals. Because if I really want to look at, okay, how can I make this be successful and enduring, it seems monumental. It seems like I will tell you, there are multiple times where I again want to quit, imposter syndrome. I'm not good enough. But I mean, that's I think what's getting me to the next thing is I just have to do this next thing, and I do that next thing, but then I have to have another thing I'm going to right after. So I'm just continuously knocking, like you said, small achievable goals.
It's hard to not get buried by all of it. It's really hard not to get buried by all of it because it can be immense at times. And, even now, like, the challenges that we're faced with now is the working, and we have our daughter and we have house projects and all of these things seem overwhelming, but at the same time, you just gotta focus on one thing at a time.
I hope at least going down memory lane maybe like gives you perspective of like, oh hey, we almost died. My friend almost died. I survived storms. I survived cockroaches eating my fingers. I think I can handle a leaky roof or my daughter teething or, just whatever life throws your way. So
It puts it into perspective.
right on. I think this is a good place to kind of, I got a couple more questions to ask. I think we might wrap
Yeah.
up. But
Thanks.
Brian, seriously, this has been incredible. I like again love that I do this Caspis because I had no idea you're a Boy Scout. That's just like an extra thing. I used to do Cub Scouts back in the day. I get a chance to make it the pack, the troop number. We kind of fell apart, whatever. But
Yeah.
it's just you would have never known any of this unless you took time to talk to somebody. And I mean, like, it's just incredible that I'm talking to like again like a mariner, a seaman of an old wooden ship. But again, you're not just that. You then took your stab at nursing, and now you're doctoring. And I will tell you, I think you very much should, whatever your story is or whatever you would like to share with people. I think that's something you should look into because it is a very unique experience, and I think you have some insane insights to tell people. Again, I please at least. I know I don't doubt you're not going to do that. I'm just going to continue to encourage that dream you have.
I appreciate it. We have started a book of just our experience, like meeting each other, kind of, and it's taken several different manifestations and iterations, but it just is. It's something that needs dedication and time and focus just put towards, and it's not something that we have spent the energy to do yet, but
maybe it's not the right time. I mean, you just got the baby girl. She's kind of important, a little bit. Just
amazing how much time and energy that little child and her laughter and her manic and everything. I gave her a glow stick for Halloween, and I lit it up today and was throwing it at the wall, and she was literally rolling around belly laughing because she thought it was the most hilarious thing in the world, like just throwing a glow stick at the wall for a good half an hour today.
That's adorable.
She's just cracking herself up, laughing and rolling. It was amazing. And those kind of things, it's like, I don't need to be doing anything else right now aside from that.
Man, I mean,
it's really nice.
It's funny. You keep going on one adventure after another. One's the ocean, one's education, and now parenting. You just have African safari's got to be next, or you're going to explore Kilimanjaro or the surface of the moon. You're going to be an astronaut next. Okay, just something.
I've told myself no more advanced degrees.
I'm gonna be. Oh man, I can't even imagine. Well, let me bring up my questions, and
Yeah,
I think I'll send you on your way right after.
no
Um,
worries.
I
I've really enjoyed this, by the way. I think it's amazing what you do. I truly admire the work that you do. I've been really enjoying listening to your podcasts.
thank you.
Haven't listened to many of anybody, and you're one of the first ones that I've actually just like sat down and dedicated, and I'm really enjoying it.
I
Thank you.
appreciate like that. Hey, and I that means a lot. This is I guess to go back to the ankle thing. This ankle thing has been like a blessing in disguise. I've been able to like really work and put time into this. I
Come on.
started a Patreon recently to make some funds. By the way, just a reminder, we got a Patreon, and we put the link in the description if you're mildly interested in supporting the show. But no, it's I just started getting into TikTok. Actually, today of all days, right before our episode, I got to meet with my wife. Works at like this kind of they make a lot of money for other people and make a consulting firm. Yeah, she works
Yeah,
a
yeah.
consulting firm, but there's an advertiser there, young kid, super bright. I hope I'm gonna have him on my show eventually. But he was just kind of helping me like take steps in like what I can do to really advertise for this. And I mean, I wasn't kidding. This is very daunting, and there are sometimes I want to throw in the towel, not because like I'll, it's a lot of work, period. But I think that's what's going to keep me from moving forward is that mantra of I just got to do this next thing. I just got to do this next thing because I would like to make this full time. I like meeting and talking to interesting people like you. I'd love to have you back on. Heck, if anything, we'll do a YouTube series and we can get back on the boat.
Heck
I'll
yeah,
have
man.
Brian, episode 2, like Revenge of the Ocean, something like that. But
We'll figure something out. Hopefully, I mean, at some point, the I'll be able to promote the book deal and the self-help classes or something. I don't know.
oh, exactly. And it's but yeah, no, this ankle break has been this again blessing in disguise. I've been able to really just make just a lot of use of my time. So just thanks for being there for fixing it. I appreciate that, my guy.
My
And
pleasure, man.
there I had something I would say. Okay, question I'm really just curious about. You miss the ocean, or do you ever like kind of miss those like because I mean to be on that granted very isolated, very terrifying and fun place, the ocean. Do you ever miss like kind of being landlocked now or not being like on those waters or kind of having this like it's just me and the ocean. That's all I have to worry about today now instead of worrying about bills and traffic and getting to work on time and getting fed. It's you ever miss that lifestyle?
Every day.
Okay.
To be honest, there are aspects of it that I miss every single day.
Like
And
like what?
the 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 feeling of a vessel on the water, it's warm, it's sunny, the most magnificent blue water you can ever imagine. Like, don't drop the screwdriver because it's 4 miles to the bottom of the ocean, kind of stuff. Like, that is a special kind of blue. The the things that you see when you're out there, the whales and the sea life and the marine life and the this and that, like there's bizarre experiences where there was one night where we were becalmed and the moon hadn't risen. There was not a cloud in the sky. The atmospheric pressure was just doing something amazing. And the ocean was flat as glass. So every star you could see just magnified, outrageously bright, reflecting off of the ocean. And it was this weird, disorienting, you felt like you were standing, hovering in the center of this orb full of stars, and it was bizarre. It was almost dizzying. It was the coolest thing. It was awesome. Or like when you're sailing through the tropical waters and there's bioluminescence just being spurred up behind your in your wake is cool experience. And or like free diving down. I mean, like there's so many different aspects of all of that life that I lived that I miss so much of. But it's it's it takes a lot of dedication to be able to continue to live that life, and the kind of dedication that it takes means that other aspects of existence can't be what they are. Like, you can't have the type of life where, the job that I have now, working in healthcare, that's a very fulfilling job for me. It's a very stable job. It's really nice. The stability of the land life and those kind of things, it's very challenging to achieve that on a boat when you are out there sailing. In order to make money, you have to be close to shore, moving passengers on and off the boat. But the best parts about the boat in the boat life is when you're not reliant on the passengers for their income, kind of a thing. It's this weird dichotomy of, you have to have the passengers to make the money, and the passengers are great and they're fun and they're fine, but ultimately just being out on the ocean that's the best of the parts.
You want to be free of it though, not like I get it though. And you know what, sometimes,
but in order to be able to afford it, you have to be then doing the thing,
Exactly. And you know what, like, you're being really nice. You could also just say, yes, sometimes the passengers are not, they're kind of dicks, or they're just rude, or they're just like, oh man, it would be so much cooler if you were just not here,
There were definitely a handful of those. There was definitely some of those. And those, the end of this experience for you is this is just another week in my life. Like, this is my job. I live this. I do this. This is your experience here. If this is what you want your experience to be, you can be as mean and ornery and just, whatever you want. That's fine, because you think you know something.
That's so funny. It's like, man, I can't wait till you get off my boat, man. Let's take your time.
There was only one experience where I was literally like, do you have a problem? And they're like, no. And I was like, because it really seems like you have a problem. And I was like, this is the rule. If you're going to break this rule, then we're just going to end this trip right now. This is for your safety. This is not because I'm being a hard ass. This is not for anything else. This is legitimately like,
do you want to live?
You did something dumb and you didn't tell me you were going to do it. You just did it, and you did it. And it was really dumb in the middle of, woke up in the morning. This guy, he did not like me because I was whatever, and he was hot stuff, and he knew all kinds of boat stuff, and because whatever. And he went for a swim one morning, didn't tell anybody, but he went for a swim in the middle of the channel for the entire island. So like, he's swimming where all the boats are coming in and out to like make their runs in the morning with like nothing. It's like, you are going to get run over and killed. Get out of the water right now. Like,
get out of the water. Just like,
dude.
Oh man, come on. Stop screwing around, bud.
Get in the boat. Go out, pick him up. Get in the boat right now. Why? I'm just going for a swim. You're in the middle of the channel. You need to get in the boat right now. No, you need to get in the boat right now.
And he just didn't like get it. Like, he was really just struggling with the it's like, bro.
It's just ego.
Man, was a young guy, or was it an older dude that just
he was like 50-year-old hot stuff,
Not to insult the older listeners of my
slightest. No, this is just
my thing. But no, I will say, you guys are
that one specific
fucking stubborn as shit. Like, just like, I shout out to my dad. Dad, I love you if you're listening to this though. But yeah, no, he used to hate me because I'd always like tell him to drink water. He's like, I drink water. And I'm like, okay, how much? And he's like, I drink a big glass. I'm like, Dad, you can drink like 5 of those big glasses, or probably like 7.
8 ounces a day.
Yeah. I'm fine. Well, Dad, is your pee extra? Oh, yeah.
Kidney failure is a thing.
Yeah. No, friggin'. My wife's the same thing, but that's another story too. All right. I got some topical questions. One question I somehow always bring up this guy in every cast. I'm obsessed with him. And Lovecraft. You ever read the guy?
H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah.
Yeah. Screw Tape Letters.
That is C.S. Lewis.
C.S. Lewis. Which one was H.P. Lovecraft?
Lovecraft was the Call of Cthulhu, Dagon, Mountains of Madness. He's the guy that basically wrote about the whole like elder gods. There's a giant fish monster in the middle of the ocean, and he's sleeping.
I've read 1 or 2 of his works. off the top of my head, I'm not remembering which one it was.
Well, you decide how much you want to explore it, because he was also like a raging racist, so it's like a hit and a miss. It's like, hey, this guy's really cool, but like,
But
yeah,
he has some opinions.
he's got. I haven't brought up the name in a while. He lived by. He was a famous like Pulp Fiction writer. Kind of wrote a lot of like weird, creepy tales back in like the 1920s, no, 1910s, fairly early on in the writer. But he lived in Rhode Island. He was always obsessed with the ocean. He hated the smell of fish. He hated the ocean, but he would always write how like kind of terrifying and vast the ocean was. It was so big and so vast that there is a Cthulhu in a bunch of things, but he's essentially this god that is older than time, older than humans, that lives in the ocean, and he's sleeping. And the moment he wakes up, though, we're screwed. Though he'll destroy. He'll rise out of the sea, and chaos will ensue. But it's just it. Like one thing he does as a writer well is that the terror of, just describing why things can be scary, the vastness of it. He does very cosmic horror of like, you are a tiny speck of dust in this cosmic ocean that doesn't give a crap about you, though. And I kind of feel almost the same way looking at the ocean. It's one of my main fears, is like, it's just so vast. It's so big. You can get lost in it. No one's going to find you. It's angry and it's beautiful, but it's also, again, at the moment's notice can turn on you. And
it's one of those, and I've gotten that question a whole lot, as far as like, how do you describe the ocean? And it's interesting, because ultimately my answer is always beautiful, because even if it's raging, even if it's, all of these emotional traits that we use to describe the ocean is just the ocean. The ocean is just this massive, vast body of water that is flowing through, it's just this chunk of water, and the physical aspect of it is just, it's affected by wind, and it's affected by current, and it's affected by heat, and it's affected by cool, and it's affected by all these different things. But essentially it's just this massive body of water. It doesn't have a personification, and humans throughout history have always wanted to try to personify the ocean as something, but it's not. It's just this intangible, indescribable sort of entity. It is. It's not.
I like that.
It just is. It just
kind of checks out with Lovecraft stuff too. It's just like, exactly. It's older than you. It does things you don't understand. I mean, we can figure it out with science and whatnot, but like you said, it simply is.
And if it's big and it's scary, that's because what you're experiencing is frightening to you. But there are others who have been. There is this great book, the first person to solo sail around the world, Joshua Slocum. His book was Solo Around the World on the Spray. What was the name of that book?
Joshua Slocum. I'll just look it up.
Joshua Slocum. The book was the boat was the Spray.
Sailing Alone Around the World.
There you go. Sailing Alone Around the World. Amazing book. Phenomenal book. He actually built the boat. It was too long, so he just cut the back end off of it and put a new transom onto it. And he was like, yep, that's perfect. And then he sailed around the world. That book is absolutely incredible. He talks about very candidly the experiences he had, not only the fear and the frustration, but the challenges and overcoming them, and those kind of things. But at one point in the middle of one of his ocean crossings, I think he was in the Indian Ocean, he's hallucinating and having conversations with his older self, of talking about why you're doing that. And like, it was neat. It was just really cool.
Just getting crazy on the ocein. Yep, that sounds about that tracks.
Sometimes you just got to lose your mind. But there are some times that have been very frightening. There are some times that have been some of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. Some of the most amazing moments that you can have, these overwhelming feelings of joy and sorrow and sadness and pain and guilt and freedom and love and joy and happiness and laughter. And it's just all of these personified emotions that you feel when you're when you just kind of delve in and go for it.
I'm also a big horror guy, so I think just being scared fascinates me. But
Hmm.
there was a movie that came out on Netflix recently. I don't know how much you are for a movie guy, or if you have time to really watch anything, but
Yeah, I like movies. We watch a lot of movies.
I'm gonna say ocean horror. Let's see. No, that's platform.
There's of course all like the cheesy shark movies.
Oh man, how do you feel about some of those? Some of those I'm like, look just awful. Like it's called
I've
Cargo. I think that's what
I've
it's
seen
called.
a handful of them. There was, their sharks are. I've actually swum with a lot of sharks. I've free dived and snorkeled with a lot of sharks in my time, and there is to a certain extent there is an understanding amongst marine animals that I don't want to mess with you because I don't want you to mess with me. Everything
Right.
is kind of a size game of I'm this big, so don't come at me. That of course all gets thrown out the window when you're dealing with certain apex predators and certain species.
Right. Bless you.
Excuse me. But, ultimately, if whenever I've swum with sharks, when I've been spearfishing and they show up, when I was in Bahamas one time and this massive bull shark showed up, or it was a tiger, I think, actually. It was a tiger shark. It was one of those like, okay, what's about to happen here kind of a thing. And,
Right.
it saw me and it swam away.
Really?
Seen a lot of bull sharks and they see me and they swim away. If I'm spearfishing, they want your food and they know that they know that a spear gun means the likelihood of food. So they associate spear guns with food. And if you have dead fish on you, of course, you're flopping around in the water like a big food source. So if you don't act like food, you should be fine.
Right. Just maybe leave the bacon coat at home kind of thing. That kind of stuff.
Oh, it's hilarious you say that. So
Oh God.
I was working.
You have a bacon comb?
I was working in the Keys at one point, and if you give the passengers a really good show, you'll get better tips. So I would throw hot dogs in the water, and the barracudas would come up, and then I would hop in the water with hot dogs, and I'd feed the barracudas and things like that. And there was this one point where I hopped in the water and I threw the hot dogs, and the barracuda swam past the hot dog and ignored it and kept coming at me because I now smell like hot dogs.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh crap, this is why you don't do that.
What did you do? Did you have to like slap it away or like just drop out the water? Or?
It followed me. I swam on my back looking at it. So my face was my chest was at the surface.
Okay.
The barracuda was just at the back of my fins, and I swam just not forcefully, but I kicked strong to show strength.
Yeah, like bro, I will straight karate chop you with my leg if you get anywhere near me, bro. Like,
and it followed me all the way back to the boat. And as soon as I got to the swim ladder, I like got my hands on the ladder and kind of pulled myself up part way, and it was like right at the tip of my fins, and I just kind of hauled myself out of the water. But after that, I was like, okay, no more hot dog feeds.
I think this goes without saying. We don't support animal cruelty on this podcast, but I will punch a barracuda. I kind of wish you just said, you're like, no, I just punched it. I let know who's boss.
I wouldn't recommend that. I knew a guy who actually did that, and he lost a couple fingers.
Oh God, dang.
Yeah, he was. That was the guy who I actually learned the trick of feeding the barracudas would give me better tips. And then he took it a little step farther where he jumped off the boat onto the fish, and the fish came back and chewed him up pretty good and lost a couple fingers.
Oh man, it sucks because like I'm looking at these things and like just that heart song, I want your barracuda, like that is not like because I'm looking at this thing. These are little dinosaurs, man.
It's
like
a formidable looking fish, right?
Yeah.
Those teeth, they're just massive.
It makes me want to punch it even harder. Like I'm just like bro, like don't come near me, man. Like I'm not playing, dude.
Makes you want to watch Shark Week all over again, right?
Oh gosh. Well, I found a movie I was looking for, I don't watch it with, obviously, don't have your kid nearby. I mean, I don't think she'll get it because I mean she's not even talking yet, is she?
Oh yeah, she's babbling up a storm. She
Oh
speaks
god.
in sentences now.
Oh man, I want juice. It's just like okay, but it's not like you don't just want juice. You want something more. But it's called Nowhere. That's what the movie is. It's on Netflix if you got it. And anyone else wants to watch it too, highly recommend it. It is brutal. It's not. It's just essentially something happens. Person may or may not be lost at sea, and it's a survival story. I believe it's of course it's fiction, but I mean it
Ooh.
is just kind of hearing kind of like again like what you have to do that moment by moment though it you can very much see the this kind of the same I want to say the same situations but very like similar kind of essences of those situations there and it's a great movie. I brutal is all I'll just say. It's just like I don't think I'm strong enough. I'll leave it at that. Again, if you want
Hmm.
to watch a good new movie on Netflix, it's called Nowhere. That's
Check it
a
out. That sounds cool.
spooky movie. Okay, so I think and then we'll end on topical note. How was your guys' Halloween? She was a giraffe. That's adorable. Were
We
you
actually went as
anyone?
a whole giraffe family, so we all got
Oh,
the tail and the headband, and we took a couple of yellow shirts and put a bunch of sticker patches on it. It had spots, and we just kind of did a very DIY costume.
you know what? Sometimes you got those years, and those are better
Yeah,
because
adorable.
you became a giraffe family together. You made one.
Even the dog joined us.
Hey, okay, there you go. So
Had a little giraffe bow tie and headband for her as well.
he's just like, Father, why did you do this to me? Like,
Yeah, she definitely gave me that look of have I been bad?
I know, like, I did not want to be this monstrosity. I wanted to be a dog. You now made me a dog giraffe. Just
What have you done to me?
Father. Nah, we're a bit horror freaks here. Love our Halloween. We did Barbie and Ken. Well, because I broke that ankle, we did roller skate Barbie and Ken, and it was just perfect. We were like, "Did you break your ankle for real?" And it was a great thing. But no,
That's
I when we get the kiddo, we want to just you can't see. We got like a bunch of like there's like a little King of the Hill
oh
horror. A
yeah,
little
nice.
the moment I have a little baby, just gonna just infect their mind with crap. Like, okay, you're gonna be. Have you ever seen Trick or Treat? It's
Oh yeah,
like
yeah.
the little
That was-
Sam guy, the little guy with the little bag on his head.
yeah,
Yeah, just that.
yeah.
Just we're gonna. That's what we're gonna do. It'll be fun. It'll be cute. It'll
You're
be
just
cute.
gonna have fun.
Yeah. Think unfortunately this is the end of our journey though we're at the port. I don't want to renew this contract. I'm good, you know, the ocean was fun but I think I got some other things to do and I think also you probably need to go to bed. Do you have work tomorrow?
No, thankfully I'm off, but little one will be up bright and early, and I always know because she gets up and the first words out of her mouth, Dada, get up.
Oh my god, and
Don't play blocks.
honey I love you but like bro is that real? Like everyone tells you it's just like when you have kids you just do it's you accept that you will only get 4 hours of sleep a night and that's it. Like you have to find a way to just it's
It's
real.
it truly is amazing how much you can survive and how much your brain will function on such little sleep and broken sleep at that.
Wonderful.
That's actually something that back to sailing days is you wake up in the middle of the night and stuff goes bad. You just got to deal with it. And you get a 10-minute nap in the afternoon when everything kind of calms down again. You're good to go and ready to go again. I actually learned while sailing that I can be completely awake with no sleep whatsoever for over 70 hours before I start to hallucinate.
Oh God, it's like that's the moment. That's
That's when I know that, yeah, weird stuff starts to happen in my brain after a solid 3 days of,
I guess that's comforting. I'll say potentially that's comforting. Like yeah, I just got that just crazy to me, man. That's just
you
jeez.
learn all kinds of limitations of your body.
I know what.
I learned I
Yeah.
can hold my breath for over 3 minutes. I learned,
Okay.
I can hang on really tight through some crazy storms. I learned, learn all kinds of stuff.
Well, like I said, the port's over. We're here.
Yeah,
The ringing the dinging bell, and I think this is us time to say
yeah.
goodbye. I think
I've
to
appreciated
end.
this.
Oh no. Hey, this has been a blast, and I mean, hey, we'll talk after the episode. But do you have any last minute things you could tell the audience? Or I mean, just like to have all those crazy adventures and to still have the adventure again of parenting right now. I mean, it to anyone else either thinking about exploring like that or maybe having a difficult time, like kind of getting through their own personal storm. Do you have any recommendations? Are there any last minute things you could tell them?
I've mentioned a couple of times where you just break it down moment by moment. There was a time when I was kind of reliving one of the moments of the dinghy sinking and floating in the ocean. And if we hadn't been able to swim to the boat, if we hadn't been picked up by the Coast Guard, what would I have done then? And I've thought about that moment a lot, especially when you're out in the middle of the ocean, you're sailing, and if the ship goes down, and what if you plan for those eventualities. If this happens, this is what I plan to do, because you have to have plans for those kind of things. Of and if it got to the point where I'm floating in the ocean and I'm in the survival suit, if you can't manage day by day, if you can't manage moment by moment, just try to manage breath by breath. Just take another breath and then make it to the next one. Calm yourself, calm your breathing, slow your mind, and stay focused, and you can get through it. And you will either be able to get through it or you won't. But you can't give up.
And I think that is very much an understatement, though. And I mean, it's like, hey, it's either you make it, you don't, or you're dead. It's plain and simple. And until those moments come, just keep going. And I'm going to try to remember that on this crazy journey, and anyone else listening, absolutely. Whether you're starting a nursing degree, you're going to go out on the ocean for a couple of months, or you want to start a cast, though, it's all it takes is just one moment and then get to the next. We're all doing this scared. So yeah, let's get through it moment by moment.
Amen to that.
All right. Well, I don't know any sea shanties to end it to, but I'll just say, I guess, how do you say goodbye? What's the nautical way to say goodbye? Just like is there one?
Fair winds in a following sea is always a classic.
Fair winds in a following sea.
Yep.
Well, Brian, if I must say, I hope you have some fair winds in your following sea.
There we are.
All right,
Thank
guys.
you so much.
It's been another ordinary personal extraordinary story. I've been Tristan, and yeah, you guys watch your seas. Take care. Bye-bye now. Thank you for listening to another episode of Ordinary People, Extraordinary Stories. If you're interested in helping the channel, feel free to click on the link below to get access to our Patreon, where we have exclusive episodes and clips not shown to the public. And of course, if you believe you yourself have an interesting story to tell, or know somebody who would be great for the show, feel free to email me back at OPESpodcast@gmail.com. That's OPES. That's the acronym for the show, Ordinary People, Extraordinary Stories, OPES, podcast@gmail.com. Thank you, everybody, and until next time.